It's time for MacBreak Weekly. Andy Ihnatko, Alex, Lindsay, Jason, Snell. Yes, your favorites are here. I'm here, too. We're going to talk about Apple making its employees return to work, even if they don't want to. A single flaw that broke every layer of security in macOS, and a Zoom problem that, fortunately, has just been fixed. It's all coming up next on MacBreak Weekly.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is MacBreak Weekly, episode 831, recorded Tuesday, August 16th, 2022. The Fluid Generic Bioprocessing Apparatus. This episode of MacBreak Weekly is brought to you by IT Pro TV. Give your team an engaging IT development platform to level up their skills. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. Go to itpro.tv/MacBreak. And don't forget to mention MacBreak 30 to your account executive to get 30% off or more on a business plan. It's time for MacBreak Weekly, the show where we cover the latest news from Apple. Alex, Lindsay, and the house from 090.media. Hello. And officehours.global. How'd it go this morning?
Went well. We had a mic off. I've got like 8 mics sitting in front of me, so
mic
like,
off.
How does this one sound?
That's fun.
So we've got like a 7B.
But you settled on that Neumann.
This,
you like that Neumann the best?
You know, for the show, yeah. I mean, for shows, this was my this is the TLM 102 by Neumann, and it was my my go-to for voiceovers for a long time. You know, and then so I still. So when I'm doing my own shows, absolutely. But a lot of times we're trying to figure out what do we recommend to guests and what do we send out to people and what do we, you know, what does this look like and what does that look like? And so that's the, so anyway, yeah, but this is I think it's a great mic. It's relatively small. You know, you can get obviously better Neumanns, but they get big real quick. There's another one that's a 103, I think, that's a little bit more expensive that I couldn't tell the difference like between the two. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to pay another $600 for a number.
This is their home version. The one thing I know that Neumann does right, which is throw out a lot of condensers, because you make them and then you have to test them, and if they don't have the right curve, you throw them out, and a lot of cheaper companies just put them all in production. So you get a really strange variation from
you notice there's just a lot of detail in it in areas that I don't get necessarily. Although I use it for my house, and I have a noise assist that's turning on, getting rid of the fan noise.
Yeah, I hear that.
And then but like the PR40 I use in the office because we have too much ancillary noise.
Yeah, this is real good.
So I go back to a PR40 for that.
Yeah. On the PR40 right now. Weighing in at 102 pounds, it is Andy Ihnatko of the beautiful WGBH in Boston. Hello, Andrew.
Hello. That would be kind of weird if I switched to this microphone that I've been using for like 10 years, because it's part of my visual user interface. I think it cues my brain into getting into that very important. No.
It's time.
You think that, but don't say that. Don't say, or find a different way of saying that. Don't just blurt that out.
I'm a fan of large coil dynamics ever since Bob Heil introduced me to this mic. But that's just personal taste. It's also your voice, what goes with your voice, and your voice sounds very nice on this. As does Jason Snell, who is using something else.
A Shure SM7B that was recommended to me for my voice. And isn't this great? It's MacBreak Weekly, right? That's what we're doing here?
It all got started by this guy, Alex, doing his 8 mics
doing his thing.
Yeah,
it's good. I mean, podcasters should care about their mics, and this is way more expensive than normal people should get. But
you have a $400 mic, which is used like radio stations everywhere use this mic.
Yeah, with a $700 interface because it has gain issues. But you know, that's fine. They make a USB version of this basically now that actually is pretty great and has better.
That's the one I have. Yeah, that's it's right in front of me. This is.
Do you like that one, Alex, as well as the SM7B?
That's the one we send out. So the MV7 has both XLR and USB out. And we do send that out. Now, we are doing the show with Michael Krasny, and we moved him to the PR40 because we thought he sounded better than the MV7.
He has a nasal, kind of higher pitched voice, which the PR40 might help with. But see, nothing's flat. Everything has something.
Yep, everything has a sound. Yeah.
And so
the MV7 is it doesn't have all those complications that the SM7B has with the game, and it's got USB, and that's really like if I'm going to recommend a microphone to anybody who's just a podcaster, it's going to be you probably would. It'd be nice if you had XLR, but USB, so you don't have to carry an interface with you. I travel with the MV7 for that reason because I don't have to bring an interface.
I should probably get a couple of these MV7s. This is their Motiv, MOTIV line that started a while ago with microphones for the iPhone that plugged into the Lightning port, and then they slowly expanded it, and they have software and stuff. And I think they've done a good job. They realized there was a pro-am, market for microphones.
One that we tested this morning that we had, and you can see it on the show, is this T-Bone, which comes out of Germany.
I like how that looks.
It's the MB7 Beta, which sounds very close to the MV7. Now, this one's only got XLR, but evidently I bought the one with the XLR. There is one with the USB that I'm going to get to test, but this one's only $85, and so it's close. Anyway, so we thought that was kind of another interesting one that we're testing.
Is there variation in the USB interfaces?
Well, they're doing the processing, so it can be a little different. It can sound a little different when it comes out, and it also, like, what does it do internally to send that USB signal out? So, both this T-Bone as well as the MV7, the XLR out is negative, I want to say negative 58 or 56 or something like that. So what that means is that on the other end, your preamp has to have the oomph to take that mic and move it to a normal level. If you're looking for something like negative 20 or negative 24 LUFS, you're going to need to have something that has enough push to do that. Now, I use a lot of sound devices stuff, and it all has that. Right. But sometimes people then have to go to a cloud lifter, which is not a great
I guess just like DACs, that A to D converters, analog to digital converters, would have good and bad chips.
It's a huge, that's one of the reasons we use a lot of the sound device stuff is because they're super quiet preamps.
Yeah, I really like the
and then they have great limiters built into them if you happen to tap them. And so it's just some of the highest quality preamps that you can get in a reasonable cost. You can definitely get really expensive.
Is that what you use, Jason? Is that your $700 interface?
USB Pre 2 is what I've got, and it's because you need a lot of gain for this microphone, and Marco Arment turned me onto it. It's also built like a tank. That's what I like about it. It's metal. It's got lots of physical controls on it. It's got some dip switches that you can set, which I love. Love a dip switch.
There have been.
It has. There's no software for it. There's nowhere to do it. I think I picked up one in my office, and it had mixed or USB Pre 2 number 60 at one point. And because we just put them in everything. They're like the Swiss Army knife. I keep thinking, I wonder if they're going to update these someday. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't know what they would change. These things are they're just beasts. I was having some recording issues recently, and I was like, I'm just moving over back to the USB Pre 2, and everything was fixed again. It's good.
So there you go, MacBreak Weekly. And courtesy of our Discord channel, we are now going to perform a mic drop. Boom. There it goes. That's a picture of a kid with a piece of paper that says mic on it, and he drops it. Because
that's one way to do it.
He's a kid, and he can't afford a fancy mic, especially one that he could drop.
A lot less damage.
You can drop the Shure SM58, however. That's okay. You're allowed to drop that.
You can actually drive nails with it and then go back to your show.
David Letterman used to. We were talking about Letterman before the show. He used to. I saw it once, and it was great to saw it. And I know you've seen it live as well, Andy. And in his pre-show, he has an SM58, this Shure microphone used in punk rock clubs everywhere, on a long cable, and he swings it around. He hits it on the ground. He plays with the thing. It's all dead. That's it, and it's all dented. That metal screen. Yeah, it's hysterical, but it still sounds fine.
The key is just don't give the talent one with a switch.
I think, yes, that's right, because the switch is so annoying. How many times? All of ours have switches on them, which is a mistake.
I put switches on the ones for talkback. So we use these in our mixers, so if we want to talk into someone's ear, like, hey, if I can give it to a client, we have other ways to do it for ourselves. But if we're going to give it to a client, we give them the switch, but we don't give the talent.
Talent will fiddle with whatever
switches
you give them. Well, I think any Apple employees that bought microphones for their fine Zoom setup can now rest easy. They're going back to work. According to Bloomberg, Apple has told employees you must work at least 3 days a week starting Labor Day. or the day after, September 5th. That's appropriate.
Come back, but don't wear white pants.
Yeah, yes. No white belts, no white pants. It's time to go to dark pants. So at least 3 days a week. Here's the thing that's really annoying. They specify the days. So you'll have to work Tuesdays, Thursdays, and a third day to be determined by your team director. Which is like, what? Well, what about Wednesday? Can we do Wednesday so I have a long weekend? No. You're going to do Friday and like it. How annoying
I do think, I do see Wednesday. I'm going to guess that Wednesday will be almost as busy as Tuesday and Thursday.
I would
because
hope.
Everyone's going to go,
Wednesday, please.
Yeah, we're going to put it, everyone's going to put, I think everyone's going to choose Wednesday if they're for a third day.
But
Not everyone, but
your boss
everybody.
gets to choose it. That's the problem.
Yeah,
well,
but your boss still has to put up with you.
Is this kind of
They're still running
retro?
the team.
That's
Like,
true.
the team's
Yeah,
upset.
that's true.
Yeah.
Is this kind of retro? Is this old-fashioned? I know companies like Twitter and I can't remember what Google's policy is, but a lot of companies are saying never come back.
I think that there's a corporate culture thing that I've talked to a couple executives at some, it's not this company but other companies, and there is a concern that there's a certain corporate culture of having everyone there, that they are concerned that people can get their work done, but at some point they're looking at multiple year erosion of company culture and how we approach things, and so I think that's one of the concerns that they have, is allowing it to just keep going down that path. It also means that by saying everyone's got to be there Tuesday and Thursday, it means that if you want to do something for lunch for the employees, something during the break or the middle of the day, because really in most of these companies, being in the office means that you have to be available for meetings between, I think it's like usually 10 and 4 or 9:30 and 4:30 or something like that. It's not really like they all get there at crack of dawn or whatever. And a lot of people come in early or they leave late, but they have to be there in that window. So that gives the company a window to, if they want to do an all hands at 2:00, they know that people will be there. Or if they want to do some kind of outdoor party or something, they can plan around people are actually going to be at the event. So I think that's probably why they're standardizing on a couple days. And then again, I think Wednesday will probably pretty busy and I think it'll be really interesting to see, a lot of employees have kind of, they've burrowed in, they've turned their garages into offices, they've turned their guest room into offices, they've moved to Tahoe, they've, done a lot of things. And I think that's going to be I think Apple pulled away partially because of COVID in the spring, but also partially because a lot of people leaving pretty quickly, and I think they need to stop and think about this for a minute. And so I think it'll be interesting to see, now that they're turning back on again, what happens again.
A lot of it, I think a lot of it also has to do with the fact that they have all this real estate that they've invested in, tremendous amounts of capital, on the pretext that we are going to have to house these many employees on an actual campus. Some of the deals that they got with the communities that they built in are contingent on, we will be bringing X number of employees into your town, and they will be probably going out to lunch and spending money and generating tax revenue while they're there. But the other sickening aspect of it is that managers want employees inside the office because it's easier to conduct surveillance on them inside the office. Otherwise, you have to basically force them to turn their workspace at home into a surveillance state through software, through like webcams that can't be covered up, microphones that can't be covered up. I know that they're using this kind of software inside the office as well, but this is becoming the pretext that a lot of different management structures are using to basically be able to look at metrics and saying, hey, on Tuesday afternoons, consistently from 2 to 3, you're only typing 40% of the time, and 30% of the time you're not even looking at the screen. What's up with that? That's like stealing from the company. So this is part of the ongoing labor battle in the tech sphere, no less than any place else.
I think that may happen in some companies. I don't think that Apple's too worried about micromanaging people's time, just because there's a lot to do as an Apple employee. That's the impression I get, at least, is there's a lot to get done. Yeah. And you show up pretty quickly as someone who isn't getting it done if you don't. And so
why make them come back?
Again, I think
I'm sorry.
I think it's a corporate culture. I think it's mostly a corporate culture concern, that there is a certain way of, that they, and again, the ability, they want people to be mixing. And
we already saw that letter from employees the last time Apple proposed this. Jason, is it retro to say you got to come to the office to get a job? Now, I think depends on the job, obviously. We make our, some of our talent has to come in. our staff.
Yeah, I mean, the blanket statement is the problem, right? But I do think Apple has a corporate culture of people being in seats. I think it stems from Steve Jobs. There's a story my friend James Thompson tells. He worked on the Finder team back in the early days of OS X, and he was in Ireland at Apple's Cork offices. And Steve Jobs basically found out that one of the Finder engineers was in Ireland and said he needs to move here or he is out. And James was like, goodbye. And I think that Steve Jobs, and I had managers like this too, they want to see butts in seats. They believe in this. And I don't want to call it a myth, but I think the serendipity of bumping into people at the coffee pot and having a brilliant conversation or having some amazing conversation in a meeting somewhere, it does happen. It does happen. But I think that it's overstated and it's used as an excuse by a lot of managers because they just want to see their people and observe them. And while Andy talks about like the timed surveillance that some companies are doing with remote workers, I think it's a softer kind of observation, like if I see you, I know you're present in the office and not messing around at home. The problem is, the truth with a lot of these knowledge workers is you can measure their success or failure at their job, and it doesn't have to equate to how long they sat in your office to do it. And Apple culturally has been reluctant to embrace that for some groups. Again, there's some groups that it probably doesn't make sense for them to be remote, but I've also worked in remote work groups and it's been great. And my overarching feeling about Apple is that I really wish Apple would do a rethink about what jobs and groups need to be present, how often they need to be present, and what jobs don't need to be present. Because while Andy's right, they've invested a lot in real estate, they also rent a lot of office space in the South Bay. They could probably afford to take some of their jobs virtual. And you know what? The cost of living in the South Bay is extremely high, and there is a talent loss that will happen.
That's a big part of the problem, isn't it?
From people who can't afford to, or for lifestyle reasons, for starting a family or whatever, do not want to have to commute to Cupertino, a suburb that doesn't have public transportation, by the way, every day. So I think the brain drain, if I were an Apple executive, I would be most concerned that our policies were so strict that we're going to have a brain drain, we're going to lose people to remote work elsewhere, and that we need to have a strategy. And I think the reality is that they're going to start making exceptions for great employees that they want to retain. And instead of doing that remote policy all at once, they're just going to essentially do it over time by letting people leave and keep their jobs because they can't afford to lose them.
And I think that rethinking the open office for a lot of these companies, and some of them are, obviously because of COVID, it doesn't work at all, but the employees hated it before that.
Weirdly, Apple dropped their mask mandates a few weeks ago in the public areas.
Yeah, but the main thing, the problem with the public areas is not COVID. It's really the fact that you can't have a conversation. You can't think straight. You can't. Everyone's talking to you all the time, and they say, well, it's really, managers were talking about it. There was someone who said, as a manager, I just love being able to walk over and talk to an engineer. And I'm like, as someone who used to be an engineer, an engineer, I was like, I hate that. Like that is like, I was in the middle of trying to figure something out, and now you interrupted it, and your 5-minute question has now cost me an hour of figuring out where I was again. And so the thing is that it is, I do think that there's serendipity. I do think at these big companies, there are things you talk about at lunch, that you run into someone. And the problem is, like, we've replaced a lot of that in office hours because we're open. We have a thing called after hours where people are there 21 hours a day. And we have a lot of that serendipity. People just come on, start talking about something, start showing something, everything else. But you can't do that at Apple because everything's top secret. Right. So you can't just have a video feed that people can just hang out in. And so I think that's one of the challenges is it does, reduce some of that. And I do think that there is serendipity at some of these companies that you would lose out on. But I think that there's a lot of valid reasons. And again, the most valid reason is that, wow, is it expensive in the South Bay to live? And it just put so much pressure on people who are there because you buy a house and now you have a mortgage of, $5,000. I mean, when you're listening to this, the mortgage in San Jose or in Cupertino is $3,000 to $6,000 for not a great house. $3,000 to $6,000 a month for not.
You may be underselling it, in fact.
No. It can be much closer to $10,000 a month that you're paying for a rundown house. Like
let's just take a look.
That are not rundown are like 10 to 20,000.
Here's a nice, here's a beautiful ranch style home. in Cupertino, 3-bed, 2-bath, 1,200 square feet, $1.9 million. And what's
the payment on it?
Let's just go down a little bit on Zillow. The Zestimate. Oh, that's the Zestimate. Where's the monthly cost? $10,000.
$10,000
a month. That's based on your mortgage and property taxes and home insurance.
So it's just super expensive, and it puts so much pressure on the employees, because it's not just does their salary. I mean, it means that their salaries are really high for Apple, but it also means that if I lose this job, I lose my house. I have to do can I find another job that's going to pay the same number that when you have to start making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 a year, that's in the rest of the country, that's a pretty rarefied space,
We think about Apple, and we think about like the creative people who are doing like, oh, we're doing the hardware, or we're or I'm programming the operating system. And although I would say that some of those jobs probably can be remote too, I think James could have built the Finder from Ireland just fine, and collaboration tools have gotten a lot better in the last 20 years. We've learned that we can do a lot of things remotely. We put the lie to this story that people couldn't work remotely, and now everybody's trying to claw it back. But let's just not forget, there are lots of jobs at Apple that are not those jobs. There are lots of jobs at Apple that are in Cupertino or Sunnyvale or San Jose because they've always been there, and because it's corporate culture for them to be there. And that's my problem with this blanket announcement by Tim Cook and Apple about this, is that I really wish they had done a little more soul searching about what jobs needed to be present and what didn't. But like I said, I think in the end, it's not going to matter, because they're going to have a great person that they want to keep or hire, and they're not going to want to live in Cupertino or surroundings, and they're going to make an exception, and that's going to keep happening until they have some dispersed groups regardless. But it's wasteful. It's wasteful for a lot of those groups to put all that time and effort and money into being present for something that is really an online collaboration, remote job anyway.
And we, there's a lot of pretty important people that left when Apple did the first pass at this. These were product managers. These were engineering managers that were like, I don't want to come back. And I live in Tahoe and I'm going to stay here, kind of thing. And they, the problem for Apple is that, a lot of times or for all these companies, is that the golden handcuffs of getting all that stock eventually become golden wings. And they don't really need to be here anymore. Like it's nice to keep on getting those stock options, but they've been getting them for 20 years and they have enough to live on, and they can start making, wider decisions. And I think that it is really, there was a product, not at Apple, somewhere else, that there were two people that could have become product managers for it. And one person would have taken it one direction. Another person would have basically cut it to the bone. And the person who got a job cut that product to the bone. And that product was Google Hangouts. Boy, did they miss out a couple years ago when the COVID hit, and it was just a decision by one person. So when you start changing one person out, and that's going to now run the idea behind that, it can change the entire trajectory of a product line.
It says corporate employees. I'm not sure what that means.
Where retail is different, right?
Okay.
For one.
You don't have to go to Cupertino if you work at
somebody who's in the
Union Square
campus. Yeah. Okay.
And they have some contractors too. There are a bunch. Apple still does, which I still find bizarre, but Apple still does work with contractors as well, where there are people who are doing support and other things, even things that are in like contractor in Sunnyvale. I know somebody who's a contractor working 100% for Apple, but for a contracting company, and their offices are just across the street in Sunnyvale, but they're technically not an Apple employee, which is a game that you would expect a company like Apple maybe not to play because they've got all the money. Why are they doing that? But that, again, it's a corporate culture thing. So this is all rolled in there. But I'll tell you, I mean, I ran a disparate, dispersed geographically office at Macworld, and the bottom line was like, I wanted the best writers I could find, and if the best writer is in Massachusetts and we're in San Francisco, am I going to hire somebody worse because I want to look at them as they have their headphones on in the open office writing stories instead of having them in our Slack or our Campfire back in the day or whatever it was?
Writers. I mean, writing is a very solitary
It is, but I mean, they have the App Store editorial group at Apple is basically a geographically dispersed group, and yet they really want to hire people and have them sit in an office in Cupertino.
That's silly.
That's the challenge here. Is there's no way to do this because there's always going to be an exception that is like, but they have to be there to design the chips. It's like, okay, that I totally get it.
Hardware
That's
has to be there. Sure.
Yeah, it's just, and this isn't just Apple. All these corporations have basically are trying to hide or run away from the idea that a lot of the arguments against remote work have been proven wrong. And that's the interesting push and pull of the next 5 or 10 years is that a lot of people have realized that it's a lie. And, companies that get on that train and realize that they can get valuable people and maybe even save some money, but get valuable people and pay them remotely and not have real estate in a downtown somewhere that makes them feel good about their company but doesn't actually do anything, they're going to get people who are more talented who want to work remotely, and they will benefit.
Here are companies, just examples of companies that are permanent remote work, like for anybody: 3M, Airbnb, Atlassian. I'm skipping some of them I don't know of. Coinbase. Well, there probably isn't anybody there left anyway. And I think that Dropbox, HubSpot, LogMeIn, Lyft, Meta, Okta, Quora, Twitter, Reddit. I mean,
well, I have a friend who works at Dropbox who moved back to North Carolina from the Bay Area.
Well, and I thought the Dropbox took one of the most interesting ways of doing it. Say, hey, the offices are here. We've got services at the offices. We've got, the little micro kitchens and places for you to have conference calls and so on and so forth. If you need somewhere to go, come on in. We're happy to have you.
They're calling it Dropbox Studios.
Yeah, I thought it was great.
That's
such
brilliant.
a really, that's the future.
Fresh baked
we're going to give you a place
in the lobby, and people will come.
Yeah. There are people who live in a small house,
right?
who live in a busy house, who live.
That's the real
point. Don't have the bandwidth.
It varies.
You need to have somewhere for them to go.
Some people like to be around other people,
for sure.
Some people don't. I think in the tech sphere, there is a preponderance of introverts and people who, if you're coding or writing, you probably do want it. I know we had an open office in the last studio. Everybody hated it. It was.
You liked it, John? Their headphones on.
I thought it was a great idea, but they did not. They did not like it. So,
yeah, we see the kind of preponderance of. It seems like in a lot of places there's like this is a big generalization, but it just seems like things get broken up into thirds, which is that you have a third of the people that are extroverts, and an average. A third of people that are kind of in the middle, and a third of the people that are introverts and would prefer to stay away. And you see that number keep on showing up. Like a third of the employees don't want to show up. A third of students don't want to show up. A third of it's in that third range of people that just don't want to play.
People are different. Right?
Right.
Yes, that's normal. But here's what has changed. The balance of power. And you're seeing it all over the work sector. Suddenly employees have so much more power than they used to. And they're standing up for their rights. And they're saying, I'm not coming back.
The argument is enjoy it while it lasts. So the thing is that it is.
You think it's going to shift back?
Well, here's the problem is once companies get really good, I've been doing global productions for years, for a decade or more than a decade. At first, you're really excited about it and it's hard and you got to figure all this stuff out. But when you get good at it, you now no longer think about, I need to find someone local for anything.
Right.
And it moves past, like the person who does most of my post work for audio is in the Philippines. Not because he's less expensive, because he's the best I can find. Like he's really good at what he does, and he's super, and his company does that. And I send stuff down to Mickey to manage those things. And he's incredibly intelligent and just knows what I need him to do, and just gets it done and does it better than I can even imagine doing it. Now, but I'm no longer constrained by thinking I had to find an audio engineer in San Francisco. That doesn't occur for me, and in the same sense that there are a lot of great people who are really good at what they do all over the world, and we're not really tapping into that right now.
Right.
We're still sending people, and we're still trying to find people in the US and still trying to find people here. But eventually, as the companies get better, at first, the companies are still in this growing phase where they can't figure it all out, and how do we transfer all this stuff, and how do we keep the company culture? But they'll get good at it. And once they get good at it, every continent, every person, especially as you have things like Starlink and everything else, you're gonna get to a point where you're hiring people, and the thought of where they live. You were doing
training in Rwanda, things like that.
We were building global communities doing this
for years.
For almost 20 years now, and so it is. But what happens is it starts to swing the other direction to some degree. Now, the people who are really good at what they do, what's great for them is that they get to live anywhere they want. They're going to make a good living. They're going to definitely make a good living for where they're living because they can make that decision, right? So it's really good for them. It's really good for companies who are looking for those folks. Where we have to kind of look at the dystopian side of this is there's a lot of people in the middle, and a lot of people below the middle that this becomes really unforgiving.
Yeah, that's right.
Like it's, because it's, and it's this, it's just that if you're not really in that, what we're seeing is a lot of people saying, oh, I don't want to do this because they can choose, but there's people who can't choose. And for them, this will get much harder.
We tell high school kids and college kids now a lot, skill up, because the burger flipping jobs are limited, and somebody who can design a website or write code is going to have much better prospects. I also have to say, for some, I suspect some of this comes back to Tim Cook standing on his big balcony at the Apple campus and looking out over his fields of surf.
Billions of dollars on this.
Billion, and it's empty, and it must hurt his heart a little bit. And I think some of it has got to be that.
Maybe. I just think, again, I think that they'd have a lot of people clamoring to come back if they got rid of the open office. So if they closed,
that really, that was
we're going to have a lower.
That was Johnny Ive's big mistake. Yes,
but they could not redesign the outside, but redesign the inside so that everyone has little offices and has a little bit more space. Yeah. Now you'd have a bunch of people because I would never want to work in an open office. Like I just couldn't, I can't think. Like I can't, and I've been in it. I've been, we were talking about contractors earlier. I've been red badges.
Also, executives have offices. Executives have the priority of the work that they do. They're in meetings with people where they need to be in meetings, right? That's part of the challenges here is a lot of the executives don't have an understanding of what that level, 8 levels down that is just doing this job. They're thinking of, we're at Apple Park and we're interacting and isn't it great? And we go to Cafe Max and I see my people and we all talk. And it's like, but what about the person who's over on the other side of the freeway in the old office building that's been there since the 80s and they're in a little team that doesn't do anything but go into cubicles and sit there looking at their screen all day, and they don't need to be there. No. And something that came up that I wanted to hammer on just for a moment is the idea that some people don't want to work at home. That's so true, and I would argue that most companies can make this. What they save on real estate, they can put into things like a reimbursement for their employees, so that if they want to work at a co-working facility or if they want to upgrade something in their house, that they have those options too. They don't, we always had like a fitness reimbursement and all sorts of stuff. It's like, do a work from home reimbursement that is also a co-working facility or toward rent in I had a coworker who rented a single office in a law firm space because they had extra offices for rent. Like, there are other ways to do that to get for people who can't work at home or prefer not to. And I think that that's all good. And then the other thing you put your money to is offsites, right? You put your money to a once a quarter or 3 times a year or every other, whatever the frequency, get your team together in person a couple times a year. And I think and you're still ahead in terms of your real estate as a company. So I think companies are foolish to do this, but companies are foolish sometimes.
I think also that you could just make it more fun to come in. Again, get rid of the open offices. Like Apple doesn't serve free food. The other one. I mean, I know some people at other.
They don't serve free food. The cafe. Oh, that's right. Steve Jobs used to have to pay for.
But other companies, I know people who that's like a big thing for them. I'm always like, you're working at this information company. I'm kind of surprised that free food is a big deal.
I'm sure companies will adjust.
But I think making it great, and especially, making it great for the employees that do come in, because you have less of them coming in, might be a way to incentivize them also too. Again, there are probably 25% or 30% that will, unless you force them to, they will never come in. But it's the other, that middle third, like, can you make it really advantageous for them to want to come in?
Yeah.
Well, there's also going to always be that middle third, however you choose to describe the demographic, that pretty much have to put up with whatever management wants to inflict upon them. And I think that part of this is really going to be, well, great, we're going to allow you to work from home, and we're going to be cutting your salary by $20,000 because we know that you no longer have to buy real estate or rent in the area.
I know companies do that, but I find that offensive.
And there's I mean, we're not talking specifically about Apple here. We're talking about like all tech companies and really all employers, and how this movement is going to affect things in the long run. Once corporations understand that this is part of the expectations of the workforce, that there's going to be some sort of a flexibility in time, they're going to figure out a way to nickel and dime the workforce out of whatever benefits that they're going to want to have. Like
I would say yes, except for competition. Go ahead, Andy. I thought we have a little delay here, but I was just going to say they do have to compete for those workers with other people, and that's the only hope, I think, because I don't think you're wrong. I just think that is, especially for these tech companies and tech workers, the problem with nickel and diming everybody, if you're Google, is that Apple or Facebook or somebody is there to give you a better offer. And so if you say, well, you moved to upstate New York and we're going to cut your salary by $20,000, well, if you get another offer, then that's the only way to fight against that. But I'm sorry to have interrupted.
It bugs the hell out of me, though.
I think the damage that it does for the employer really is that I have a bunch of friends that all left. That all left the Bay Area. Like, I don't know. I mean, literally 20 or 30 friends that just went, whoop, they're gone. And they went to Hawaii, and they went to back
Barbados.
East, and they went to the mid.
I almost went to Barbados. Lisa and I came this close.
Exactly. And so they all dispersed. And when they were told, you can stay where you're at, but we're going to do a cost of living adjustment, they didn't quit immediately, but they all prepped their LinkedIn and they all started replying. The problem really is that the mentality of a person who's applying to other jobs all the time, not ready to leave anytime soon, is that they're not really engaged with your company either, and so they're not working the way they used to work for you. And they're always just thinking about, and every meeting that they have with an external partner is a potential person that they might talk to about, hey, what's going on there, and just knowing about it. And so I think that that's the danger for companies, is when they start nickel and diming people, as we said, that you have people who become a lot more fluid about their relationship to the company.
Yeah.
Okay, but imagine that segment of the workforce for which taking off to Barbados is not an option. That they've got to take care of elderly parents who are sick. They've got to take care of children with special needs. They're having problems just getting by day to day. Those are the most vulnerable people, and the corporations know about that. It's not, and a lot of the work is.
Well, that's when you start
offices
getting on the desk and saying "union now."
Right, but I'm saying a lot of the work in offices since time immemorial has not been the visionary person who figures out how to make AC current work and is indispensable and is eminently hireable. It's the people who are, as part of running this office, we need someone to hand copy this correspondence that's been done in longhand because it's 1880 something and the Xerox machine doesn't exist. Even letter X doesn't exist until then. And these are still the people who are, again, writing Python scripts, has a skill set that is very important, but is also very, very much in the market. If you want to find someone who you can get someone with a master's degree who can do high school level scripting jobs and admin jobs. And so these are the people that are going to say, well, I really don't want to have to install this software on my personal phone, so that you can basically make sure that I'm actually responding to service texts in a span of time, and that you're docking my pay. You're making my pay contingent upon my hitting certain metrics of performance. But again, I've got a sick mother. I've got to take care of her. I've got 3 kids that aren't going to be going off to college for 4 or 5 years. I got to take care of them. So it really is, as Jason said, different people have different situations and different circumstances, and so we always have to be very, very assured that, as always, that this technology and this movement is not going to be turned from something that frees people up to give people more freedom in their life, more choices in their life, more flexibility in their life, more power to get the work that they're being paid to do, and do that work better and with better work-life balance, and make sure that tilts all the way in the side of the employer to make sure that this is going to be great. This employee that we used to have as a contract employee paying $90,000 a year to, now we can figure out a way to pay her only $53,000 a year and not give him any benefits. This is awesome. We love Viva la Revolution, says the billionaire owner of the company.
I guess really what's happening here is it's really a trend story, and it's not just Apple. And the trend is employees are not willing to march in lockstep anymore, and they're not all the same, and they're not cookie cutters, and the environments can't be cookie cutters. And some companies are adjusting better than others to this. Right.
Well, and again, I think that it is a definitely a moving target. Like right now, you want to take advantage of the fact that you're a rare thing. But if you also, for the employees who do like working at home and then slow down because they have other things to work on and they have other things to do, and there's the house and the thing that it will be, if you're in the West, you have to keep getting better at what you do. Like, period. Yeah. Like you don't get to like. Oh,
it's a rat race. That's for sure.
And so you just need to know that, especially if you're on the coasts, that there is a moving. You have to stay current with a lot of those things, because you are first competing with other people in the country, other people in the state, but eventually you really will end up competing with the rest of the world, and their cost of living is I've always. Up and told my wife, I was like, if we just moved to Rwanda, which is where I would move if left to my own devices, I was like, I could
live like kings.
I could do office hours in the morning, and that'd be it.
That'd be it.
And then I'd go hang out, because I'd work a couple hours a day, and that would be, then I'd go work on the garden or whatever.
As the stock market crashes, my expectation of where I'll retire goes down the list. And you know what? I could live very well in in Mexico on this amount of money, and then I could easily find a job. But like for instance, living in Marin, I think a lot, about salaries and process and things, and making sure that I stay effective. Yeah, same. We're both in Marin. You're like, hey, I gotta get up in the morning and get some stuff done and move things forward, because I have a mortgage to pay. 20 years ago, when we moved from San Francisco, because Abby was a little baby, and we were told we were going to move north, we just drove through Marin. We didn't even stop. We just went right through Marin, kept going to Sonoma County, where it is it's not so much so, but was a little bit less expensive 20 years ago.
Yeah. But anyway. It's always like when I get asked, why am I working on the weekend? I'm like, because I like the house.
Mm-hmm. I like living here.
I like living here. So it's like
living here.
Things need to get done. Yeah, exactly.
All right, well, we'll watch and see with interest what happens. At least Apple's not saying 5 days a week, right? They're only saying 3. You still can have 2 days at home. Maybe they feel like that's the compromise.
That drive is brutal.
It's always, no matter where you're coming from. That's a horrible.
This policy will, even though it's not completely work from home, this policy will help extreme commuters. And for people who don't know, there are a lot of extreme commuters because when you get out of the blast radius of the South Bay, you can find things that are more affordable, not super affordable in terms of the rest of the country or world, but more affordable in terms of Bay Area and sort of like greater Bay Area. And so a lot of people, like we used to have in my office in Denton, San Francisco, we had a guy who lived in Modesto, which is, I mean, it's far, folks. It's far and lots of traffic. And he would come in a couple of days a week. And so like this reduced schedule will actually help those people who have the terrible commutes save several hours a week out of their lives. So it's, again, not as good as it was, but better than coming in 5 days a week. It's a step.
And a lot of them have apartments somewhere in that area that are just really bad, like one-room studios that they stay in for the weekdays. And a Tuesday through Thursday, but a Tuesday through Thursday experience where you go down, you're there doing your thing, and then now I think a lot of them though will be like on Friday. They'll be there for the meetings. After having to come in. That's the problem you really have, is that they'll come in for 3 days a week, but they'll be for those who are forced to and are bitter about it. Monday and Friday may not be very. They may not get as much done.
But that's why housing prices up here went up, because, yes, it's an hour from San Francisco, but it's at least an hour from San Francisco. And then now people are going to Mendocino, going farther and farther up north. And I remember having a 2-hour commute in traffic back and forth.
My brother's in Jenner.
It's awful, awful. We have employees, frankly. We had, and it always makes me nervous when we hire somebody who's got a 2-hour commute. It's like, do you really want to come to the office? And it puts pressure on us to say, yeah, take a few days a week. We're now a 4-day work week. Even if you had to come in, you'd only come in 4 days. Right. And because the commute everywhere is terrible nowadays. It's just awful. All right, let's take a little break, come back. There are other stories. There's not a lot. I confess, we're filling time here. I am curious when we get your predictions ready. Get your prognostications prepared. You peerless prognosticators. When is Apple's event going to be? We'll talk about that when we come back in just a little bit. But first, a word from IT Pro TV. Love these guys. When they started, what has it got? It's been like now 9 years, almost a decade. Tim and Don and the team there, they were so great. Remember, Lisa and I a few years ago went out to celebrate the opening of their new studios. They have now, they have done so well. 7 studios, open all day, Monday through Friday. What do? They teach people IT. And they do it better than anybody. And they do it in a way you're going to love because you can watch it on your TV, you can watch it on your computer, your phone, you can watch it on Apple TV. It's a great way to get the IT training you need to either get into IT, to advance your career, or, and we always talk about individuals, I really should mention, it's also great for businesses that have IT teams they want to upskill or just keep them excited about the field. IT Pro TV is a great way for you as a business to support your IT team. It's a great benefit you can give the IT team, but you get the benefit because they're better at security, they're better at networking, they're better at desktop support because they take these classes at IT Pro TV. And you're not giving them something they won't use. More than 80% of users who start a video at IT Pro TV finish it because it's engaging. They call them edutainers. Their trainers at IT Pro TV are, of course, first and foremost experts in the field, but then they also choose them because they're so fun, they're engaged. And I think it comes from a passion for the field, a passion for what they're teaching. That communicates to your employees, to your IT team, and that passion is exactly what you want from them. Binge-worthy, entertaining, high-quality content in every area, all your certs, all your training in one place. They've got every vendor and skill you'd need for IT team training, including Microsoft IT, Cisco, Linux, Apple, security, cloud. That library is always up to date. That's why they have all those studios. More than 5,800 hours on demand, ranging from pure technical skills, compliance issues. There's soft skills too, like marketing, running a business. So really everybody can benefit from IT Pro TV. Plus, you'll like the dashboard for the business plan. You can completely track what's going on, manage your seats, assign team members, unassign them, even create subsets of users. So you can say, you 3, you need to learn this. You can even assign single episodes as well as the entire course. Episodes are 20 to 30 minutes long. You get metrics like logins, viewing time, tracks completed, and more. I think it's just a fantastic way to keep your team engaged, skilled, to give them new skills, and of course, as an individual, it's a great way to learn. Give your IT team the development platform they need to level up their skills and enjoy it at the same time. And a team can be anything from 2 members to 1,000 members. Volume discounts start at 5 seats. So it doesn't have to be a giant team. Go to itpro.tv/MacBreak. The offer code MacBreak30 will get you 30% off. Mention that to your account executive at IT Pro TV. itpro.tv/MacBreak. And by the way, that offer code applies to individuals too, so remember that when you go there. itpro.tv/MacBreak. MacBreak30. For individuals, it's 30% off. Do me a favor. Go to itpro.tv/MacBreak and check it out. At least check it out. I think you'll be very impressed with what they put together. And we thank them so much for supporting everything we do here at TWiT, including MacBreak Weekly. You support us as a MacBreak Weekly viewer or listener by using that address, itpro.tv/MacBreak. It's the fun time of year, DEF CON and Black Hat. So, of course, Exploit City. You saw the guy, I love this, put a special agricultural version of Doom on a John Deere tractor. That's the way to go.
So why not Farm Simulator? For heaven's sakes, you missed the obvious.
Well, you apparently, I didn't see it.
Escape.
But
you're trying to escape.
You're apparently, you're farming corn in Doom. So it is kind of like,
there you go.
Anyway, that was an amazing crack. I'm sure we'll talk about it on Security Now this week. And one of the things he found out, by the way,
very important one,
is very important because, of course, farmers hate it that John Deere locks everything down. You really don't own your combine or your tractor. John Deere completely controls it. And it turns out they're running an antiquated version of Linux not GPL, but they're not honoring the GPL. And oh, go get this, Windows CE.
Windows CE. The failed Windows mobile operating system from
God.
Oh God! Is that from the Bush era, or does it go all the way back to Clinton? I got to look it up.
It's old. I had a CE way back, well before the iPhone. So I think it probably is George H.W. Wow. Anyway, that's another story for another day. There is definitely some Mac stuff too. A single flaw broke every layer of security in macOS. This is the article from Matt Burgess and Wired. It's an injection flaw. Fortunately, Apple, we should say right up front, patched this a long time ago. But it's now at Black Hat. You can actually see the details. Alchemade, who is presenting the work this week in Vegas, found the vulnerability in December 2020, reported it to Apple. He says he was paid a pretty nice reward for the research. Apple issued at least 2 updates to fix it, first in April of last year and again in October of last year. But it was kind of a nasty bug. Multiple steps to launching the attack, but it all comes back to the initial process injection vulnerability. A process injection, as I'm sure Steve Gibson will explain, and if I were a better student, I would know, allows hackers to inject code into a device and run code in a way that's different to what was originally intended. I think he uses Xcode to do this. It was a serialized object in the save state system, which saves the apps and windows you have open. When you shut down a Mac and it reopens those, that saved state system can run while a Mac is in use. It's a process called AppNap. When an application is launched, it reads some files, tries to load them using an insecure version. There's the word you're looking for, of the serialized object. Alchemade said, in all of Apple's operating systems, these serialized objects are used all over the place, often for inter-process exchange of data. The way the attack works is you can create those files at the place another application will load them from. In other words, spoof the serialized object, replace it with a malicious one, and then the problem is that the system just accepts it unchecked, and so it is a flaw that can bypass system integration system integrity protection. Now I imagine what all Apple had to do is say, oh yeah, we should probably check those as well. Maybe we should make sure. But that was a bad one. Again, fixed by Apple.
Well, I think it was a couple, if I remember correctly, they had to patch it twice. So it wasn't, it was like they patched it and then they patched it again.
Yes.
So. But it wasn't, I don't think it was used in the, I think he found it. I don't think it was used in the wild that they know of.
No, I think that's the case.
You had to have access. Did you have to, I think you had to have access.
Physical access to the machine.
Physical access to the computer, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like they patched it twice. It looks like they patched it for iOS and then they patched it for macOS.
Okay, got it.
Because it's a similar issue for both sides.
It's not clear how you would exploit this, but I'm guessing you could also put up, for instance, a malicious repository on GitHub, an Xcode repository that did the same thing. So if you could get somebody to load your code somehow, and that's social engineering. You would also you don't have to be the one sitting at the keyboard. Most exploits, somebody has to do it. Right, it's not
right. This is they get a pirated piece of software or something like that by doing this thing, and that is running an Xcode project, and then you have to agree to and they do a little helpful step by step of like, well, now click OK, now put in your password, now click OK, and then you end
always be
up with
careful.
This.
Yes,
it's funny that they mentioned AppNap because I was under the impression that AppNap is not happening on Apple Silicon Macs, but just on the Intel Macs. But there's another process because it's more like iOS. There's another process where it's staying awake. It never really naps, right? It's sort of always awake in a way that Macs didn't used to be.
It's pretty technical, but the blog post is at his website, and you can actually, now that Apple's patched it, he did, by the way, praise to Alchemade because he did what's called responsible disclosure and told Apple, and Apple fixed it, and then now, 6 months later, he's telling people how you can do it.
Yeah. And let's also be happy that Apple seems to be a little bit more agile in responding to developers to security researchers who are providing these bug reports, because they have not always been as grateful as they need to be. We've had multiple reports for the past 2 or 3 years of someone who tried to file get them to pay attention and act on a bug that they supported, and either they keep the patch keeps getting delayed, and then when it actually gets happened, the security researcher doesn't get credited for the bug kill. The bug bounties were not nearly high enough, commensurate with the amount of work that security researchers put into finding these things. It really is you either pay. It really is. Do you want to pay like $500 to the exterminator to get rid of the termites in your house, or do you want to spend $20,000 later on to have the foundation replaced? It's an easy $500 to spend.
Patched in macOS 12.0.1 Monterey. So you're probably okay if you.
Yeah, but it's just great to see Apple stepping up and pay. I mean, I know there are criticisms that they're still not necessarily doing it the way the security community would like, and maybe not paying them the amounts they would like. And I mean, at what point are we tired of the story that Apple is doing a thing in a way that everybody else in the world doesn't like? That seems to just be Apple. They're going to do it the way they think is right. But they have gotten on board with this idea that if somebody is, they're motivating people to find flaws and paying them for their work, and we're all safer as a result, and that's how it should be.
Yeah.
Another discovery from everybody's favorite Mac, good guy security researcher, Patrick Wardle, in Zoom. Oh, no. Not again. Oh, no.
Is Max Headroom going to appear in the middle of the show now and take over for us?
I am wearing Max Headroom's blazer. Maybe. Yeah, it could be.
If they cast Matt Frewer like in the original, I'm fully on board with that.
They are, by the way. Did you know
yes,
they're bringing it back with Matt Frewer?
Yep.
Because only he can be Max Headroom, because he's got that square chin jaw. And he could survive
also, there was
a
guy who wore a Max Headroom mask who took over a TV station in Chicago.
I know that one.
That was the reference I was trying for there. But either way, I mean, we're on an unsecure line now. Everybody just be aware the line is insecure.
So there is an auto update feature in Zoom. There he is. Hello. See?
It's Max.
That's me. I need a black rubber tie, though. Then I'd be set. And a square jaw. Zoom has an auto update feature. This is sometimes a problem. You've been there. You go into a meeting and Zoom says, we got to update. And then you enter your system password. And the problem is you enter the system password once, the first time, when you set up the feature. From then on, Zoom doesn't have to ask. It has permanent permissions. Patrick Wardle said, he presented at DEF CON this past week. 2 vulnerabilities he found in the automatic update feature's validation check for the updates. For an attacker who has access, this is a physical access attack. The vulnerabilities could have been changed and exploited to grant the attacker total control of the victim's machines. Zoom has fixed these vulnerabilities. Well, he found another one, which he hasn't yet told Zoom about, that reopens the attack vector. Wardle told Wired ahead of his talk, I was curious about exactly how they were setting this up, and when I took a look, it seemed on first pass they were doing things securely. They had the right ideas. But when I looked closer, the quality of the code was more suspect. It appeared that no one was auditing it deeply enough. That's Lord.
Zoom for you.
That's Zoom for you. Automatically.
And by the way, I turn most automatic updates off.
Maybe this is a good idea. Certainly one that only asks for the password once.
Right. Yeah. But in general, I just turn them off, and I like to wait. Typically, unless they have a feature that I really need at that moment, I like to wait a week or two and just like
that's a good point too.
Just see how it sorts out, and now we'll jump into it. Just because sometimes that goes out and they almost immediately find something. You'll see those like 3-day security patch that comes out after something. I like to just sit outside of that and let it sort itself out. There's very rarely something new. There's rarely something I needed in the next 2 weeks.
Zoom actually they have a slow and fast update channel now. So it's actually a nice feature that more people should probably have. So if you're like Alex, you could turn on auto updates so you are sure to get those security fixes. But if you're on the slow channel, it does mean that you're only getting it after it's sort of been out there and it's a version that they're happy with, instead of getting the new update all the time. And I like that as an idea of being able to choose to be on the fast or slow path. More software should do that.
Makes sense.
Another aspect of that is that when you have auto updates put in, it can destabilize your machine even when you haven't restarted yet or haven't clicked to apply those patches, because I find that there will be sort of a partial, like a pre-install load, and for some reason some weird stuff is happening with my internet connection, or some really weird stuff is happening with a Windows manager. I'm getting things that are Windows are taking a long time to redraw, and then I dig myself out from under it, and I find that there's a dialog box saying, "Hey, I've just system update XXX has just been downloaded. Do you want to restart to affect these changes?" And yeah, I would like to think that this system would say, "I'm not going to do anything that's going to mess up your computer, Andy," especially because given that it's like 6:30 in the morning and someone is expecting this thing to be finished in the next hour and a half. I do think that it's as important as it is to make sure that you have the latest versions of everything for security reasons as for stability reasons. My system is a lot happier, and I'm a lot happier with it just alerting me and then letting me choose the time and the place when the disaster happens.
Zoom says it's important to update. We've resolved these security issues. We recommend you keep up to date with the latest version of Zoom. Zoom offers automatic updates to help users stay on the latest version. Wardle agrees. But he says the main reason I looked at this is because Zoom is running on my computer. The good news is, as of yesterday at 2:10 p.m. Eastern Time, Zoom has patched the second flaw he talked about at DEF CON. So if you're interested in the details, Lily Hay Newman has a very good write-up on it in Wired, in which she describes the first flaw, a way to bypass the cryptographic signature check. She says, imagine you carefully sign a legal document, then put the piece of paper face down on a table next to a birthday card you signed more casually for your sister. Zoom's signature check was essentially looking at everything on the table and said, oh, that birthday card signature is just fine. Go ahead. I don't know how apt that metaphor is, but it's good. I get the idea. That was the first flaw. He found a second flaw. So...
And just as a statement, Zoom takes these things pretty seriously. I mean, they obviously had some PR problems at the beginning of.
And that's when they hired a bunch of very good people to
but I got to tell you, you turn all the dials up on Zoom, and it's about as there's always this balance between convenience. I mean, a lot of times when things are made, when you have a mistake with security, it's because they're trying to make it more convenient for someone to install or whatever. Because that's always the thing, is like, we try to get someone to put a new version of Zoom on if we're going to have them do a remote. And they're like, why do I have to do this? And now I have to fill out all these things. And that's what they're trying to get past. And sometimes they don't get it right. But I think that it's all of them are pretty secure at this point, because they're being used so much, and they're under a lot more attacks than they were in the past. Yeah. And we haven't seen, I don't know if anyone really used this one. It's just something that we saw.
I'm going to ask this, by the way. You might as well get used to it every single day, Tuesday, until it happens. When's the Apple event going to be? Well, I did it last week. There was no general consensus. They still, I don't get invites, but I think they still mail them out a week ahead of time, right? So we won't know.
Right now it's a week. If you're not doing it in person and it's just remote, they give you about a week's notice, which is not... I'd prefer more notice than that, but
sure.
They don't care about that. I mean, I'm going to guess the 13th is the most likely, because they like Tuesday events, and Labor Day week is challenging because then you're asking people to do it the day after Labor Day. They have in the past also done them like a day regress, so you could do it like on the 7th. Right. I think that's a possibility
Wednesday
too.
After Labor Day,
but they could. But if it's not in person, it doesn't matter. To them.
In a production world, if it's not in person, if you're not doing a stage event, it doesn't matter. It is really expensive to do things on the day after Labor Day, because while the event is on the day after Labor Day, the production crew is there on double time on Monday and Sunday. So you're there's a good reason why a lot of people do things on Tuesday, is because it gives you one weekday to get ready for the event, and it gives you otherwise the most amount of weekdays to get press before it disappears into the following week. So Tuesdays are generally a popular
day. And the rumor
altogether.
mill says, and it's no surprise that they have begun recording the features, which implies that it will not be all require in person. Didn't they do a hybrid thing last time where, I know Google did, where there were some people, right, at WWDC, there were some people at the Apple campus.
But I don't think anyone was in Steve Jobs Theater. I think
it was outside.
Outside,
yeah,
big LED wall.
Yeah,
it's COVID thing, but it would be nice to go back into the. I still think that they can just play a movie at the theater. It'd be just as nice. Rather than having people walk on stage. I do think that the last one was a bit the ones that I felt like peak keynote was like December or whatever, November. End of 2021 was like the best one we've seen ever. And then it felt like they were trying to get ready to go back into the stage, and it's got now slower and more full of blah than it had been before. So I'm hoping that they just give up on it and just give us a good movie.
Apple has a lot of things they need to announce, by the way. So they're probably a September and an October, as in the past.
Mm-hmm. An iPad event, an iPhone event, AirPods event. Yeah.
iPhone 14, the rumor is 4 models. 2 of them will have the A14 or A15. Now I'm all confused. 2 of them will have last year's chip. 2 of them will have this year's chip. There'll be two 6.7 versions and 2 whatever, a little bit smaller versions. I guess they would do the watch the same day.
Because it's an iPhone accessory. It'll be the same time.
So a new Apple Watch 8, and then there's the rumors are there'll be 2 kind of models. There'll be a Pro version now that's going to be a titanium alloy. And have some pro features, maybe additional athletic features. And the big new feature is it'll monitor your temperature.
It'll sense your temperature and kind of say maybe.
It won't tell you what your temperature is, but it'll say it's up a little.
It will say, yeah. It will say, it will basically be like an image of a doctor, male, female, gender of your choice going. because temperature sensors aren't really accurate for wearables yet, and also they might be limited as to what the FCC will allow them to say their temperature sensor can actually provide as far as help goes.
Yeah, my Aura Ring, which has had temperature sensing for a while, only shows you the trend. Says you're up half a degree, you're down half a degree. But that's actually valuable. I started wearing it because of COVID to kind of give me an early alert that maybe I'm not doing so well. Although I'm healthy now, and I noticed it fluctuates quite a bit. So I don't know if that's the Ring, or I would guess Apple's going to do a better job than
for me, it's always the watch really is one of those things that has to have something that I don't feel like I need to update the watch very often, because of what I use the most out of the watch is the timer. Yeah. Like the timer and the alarms, like reminding me of something to do is the thing that's probably the most important piece of the watch. And so I don't, I find myself going, well, and I like the heartbeat and I like the things, and I finally upgraded, but I think I'd skip 2 or 3 years before I upgraded again. The phone, I've skipped a couple years, but this one, I think the big thing for me is to see what they do. I mean, now I just watch what they're going to do with the camera. The cameras have just really just feels like every year they get significantly better. Like they really realize that what we really want is a camera that has some phone functions, and they keep giving them to us.
Good. Thank you. I'll take it. Reportedly, again, where there's all rumors, the front-facing camera will now have autofocus. And the new back-facing camera, instead of 12 megapixels, is 48 megapixels. But that's binning, probably, right? Not native.
Certainly.
Yeah.
My guess is, though, that it'll probably be a big leap in image quality, and Apple doesn't do these. Apple resisted going above 12 for a long time because Apple was focused more on the light being captured by the pixels and the end image quality, because they have a very specific philosophy about building iPhone cameras. So to go to 48, I'm sure they will talk about how they're doing binning and maybe only Apple could do it this way kind of thing. But in the end, it still, regardless, is probably going to be the biggest iPhone camera upgrade we've seen in a while, I would think.
Yeah, particularly for video. If they decide to go for 8K video shooting, that would be a pretty damn interesting development for on a Samsung phone. You think that, okay, once again they want to be the first to introduce a feature, even if it's a crap feature that no one wants to use. If Apple were to do a higher than 4K resolution video capture, that would be something pretty amazing. Or even if they just use the extra pixels as slop around the 4K to do automatic tracking of if you're holding the phone remotely stable, to be able to do a virtual tracking shot that holds a subject in the middle like that. As I think of that, though, the next thing I think about is Apple is usually really stingy in terms of how much storage they give you for whatever buck you're willing to spend. So are they willing to sell me a 64 gigabyte phone that shoots 8K video, metaphorically speaking, or is it going to be this show it shoots 8K video, but you're gonna want to have the $1,500 top whack 2 terabyte storage model in order to actually use it effectively?
There's precedence for this because they didn't RAW. You could shoot RAW. And on the lower storage configuration, they basically said, you can't. Sorry, you can't. Yeah. And they actually turned the feature off because they're like, there's no point. There's not enough room for this. I suspect we're on the precipice, and this might be the model where all of the different levels are raised up, where there's a 2 terabyte storage at the very top, wow, where it might have been 1 before, and that there's rumors that there's going to be a price increase. And one of the reports I think Ming-Chi Kuo made suggested that they expect a kind of 10 to 15% increase in average selling price on the iPhone. The only explanation for that, it can't be explained by mix, by adding in that big low-end phone and getting rid of the mini, RIP mini. But if that's the case and they raise the price of every iPhone base model by $100, one scenario there is that what they do is they raise the base storage, because remember, all the base storage is, I think, 64, and then it's $100 up to 128. So one scenario might be that they just lift all of the storage, start at 128, at least on the Pro models, and then maybe add an enormous storage tier on the very top, because that, not only, as Andy points out, not only is that data that you could probably use, but it's a lot of margin for Apple, and Apple likes that.
Yeah. There also just a note that it's not an apples to orange comparison as in defense of Apple in terms of what they charge for storage, because Apple puts a real priority on the fastest possible data path. So it's not just they're buying whatever commodity chips they can possibly find, and just so long as they can get 512 gigs of storage on there, it works. It has to be 512 gigs of storage that can record video at the level of quality that they want to record at indefinitely, without any stutters, without any crashes, without any bounces or anything. So there is that, but it is annoying that if, like me, I don't put a real high value on really great video recording. What I do want to be able to do is to be able to put as many comics on the phone, as many music files, as many video files, capture as many pictures as I want without having to run out of storage or have a performance slow down because we're running out of storage. And for that reason, I'd much rather have the cheaper RAM but have more of it. It's too bad that you don't have really that option.
And I'd much rather see, much higher frame rate than higher resolution. So if 8K is great, but there's just nowhere to play it, and so, I think that, and Apple doesn't usually put stuff in that is way over top of something to do with it. And so 8K may be something that's there, but I think that higher frame rate 4K is probably would make more sense, going to 240 or even 480. It's just so much fun. People love slow-mo. I agree. And the funny thing is that slow-mo is cool at 120, but when you get into we do a variety of stuff where you need slow motion. At 480, it's pretty magical. 240 is really cool, but 480 and above, the 480 to 1,000 frames a second it's just such a fun experience. Does it have to be you just start doing all kinds of stuff.
Does that have to be slow-mo? Could you have high frame rate that was normal speed that just looks smooth?
Well, I think that Apple's on its way to 120. I think that everyone's on their way to 120. Almost every camera you buy now has one. They're starting to get 120. The Apple TV is capable of 120. The current Apple TV is capable of 120. all our TVs have been capable of 120 for a long time.
That really changes how something looks as much as 4K does, right?
It's much more visceral, so it doesn't have the cinematic look. So if you're looking for a cinematic experience, but what I will say is that if you've ever seen any sports at 120, it's pretty. Yeah. It is, and the real thing that I think that again, I still feel like this is going to fold into MLS in the next couple of years, is that MLS gives Apple, the soccer league gives Apple the ability to the first year, I bet you it'll look like a regular TV show, but I bet you behind the scenes, Apple is shooting 120 and looking at that and everything else. And maybe the second year for the first year, by the end of the season, if the first year went well, we might see a couple shows that are, and all you have to do there, it's not like everybody has to see 120. All you have to do is set the top ladder on the manifest to be, there's a 120 version of this show that's being embedded into it. And if you don't have the bandwidth for it, we'll just give you the 60 frame a second. It's not a big deal. Yeah. And if you set it turns out that if you set the shutter speed to what we call 360 degrees at 120, it doesn't bother you. And it means that the 60 looks fine. So you could do same show.
Shutter speed.
So shutter speed is, basically what we're used to looking at on TV is what we call 180 degree shutter, which means that the shutter speed is twice the speed of the frame rate. So if you have a 24 frame per second, your shutter speed is 48. If you have 60 frames a second, your shutter speed is 120.
I thought the shutter speed was determining the frame rate.
No,
I guess
the
not,
shutter speed,
because
it's how the shutter, it's just how fast that shutter goes around. And we've gotten used to motion blur that is from 100.
So there's, wait a minute.
It's half open. It's open half the time, not all the time.
You got to start. Okay. Erase. So I understand there's a shutter in a still camera. There's shutters in video cameras?
Well, it's just how fast it exposes. There's no shutter now. But
so a video camera is really taking individual stills at a certain rate.
Well, it's worse than that, because it's actually not. It's taking individual lines. It's what we call a rolling shutter, which means that it takes it's how fast it scans the chip. Yeah, it's not. If you see a global shutter, it's taking it all at one time. But
nothing's fast enough. It's uncommon to have it be fast enough to grab the whole image. That would be very expensive.
It's expensive. You don't put it in the cheaper cameras.
So most of them are scanning it.
What we call a rolling shutter, and that's why
they're going to the top of the screen 120 times or 30, 60, 120 times a second.
But what happens is it does that if it's grabbing a frame. It's how long does it take to grab that frame? So if it holds it open and takes that frame over the entire frame rate. So if it's 24 frames a second and you have it at what we call a 360 shutter, which means it's the effectiveness of the gate was open for,
except there is no
whole
gate
time
anymore,
the frame was being exposed. Right.
But it's like
so
that. Okay.
So what we found is that if we do that, it feels a little dreamy. There's a lot of motion blur that happens in that if the frame is open every 24 frames. And so we keep it open.
So you could have a high frame rate, but 24 frames. In effect.
Well, no, you have a high shutter, but 24 frames.
24 frames. Okay.
Yeah, so you can, and then that looks really stuttery. So like if you watch old World War II stuff, that's a 90 degree, so that's 1/4 of the time. And you'll notice that World War II looks very, in fact, Saving Private Ryan, they shot the whole thing on 90 degrees.
To give it that
look. To make it feel like World War II footage. And so but you'll notice that it feels a little what we call framey, because there's not enough motion blur to tie the frames together. And so what you have to do is every time, and the problem is that as you start to increase that, you start to end up with less light, because you're not, so if you treat 120 with a 180 degree shutter, you end up at 1/240th of a second. If you're a still photographer, you know what that means. It means there's not a lot of light there. And so what you do is what you can do is expose what we call 360, which is that the 120 frame per second is getting a whole, and it works out. I mean, for whatever reason, it works out okay, but it means the 60 is getting the shutter speed it expects. And then then to make this all more complicated is if you have LED lights or regular lights, they'll all flicker because your shutter is way faster than they are. And so that's why even with slow motion, sometimes you see this of the lighting, because you're taking 5 frames for every. But yeah, so anyway, to get back to all of the stuff is I think that 120 is coming, and I think that Apple is uniquely prepared for that because they can turn that camera. The camera's already shooting 120. They could deliver it to Apple TV or a lot of other devices at 120. They also build content, and now they're getting into sports. So they could go to 120 at any time. probably easier than almost anybody else out there, and so what it does is it just means that I will say, as someone who's worked in 120 in the past, that it's addicting. It's like, I wouldn't shoot a film that way because it's disorienting, because
we have a different expectation for drama.
Your brain also, there's certain things that your brain starts to look at it more closely to reality. Now, some people say that outer edge is 480 degrees, but 480 frames a second. But I think that there is a sizable difference about mid 90s, like 90.
I agree.
In the mid 90 frames per second, your brain starts to think about what it's looking at differently.
I agree.
And if it fills your aperture, so if you can't see anything but the video and you're at 120 frames per second at like 8K, it's disorienting. I've actually sat there looking at an LED wall that's 8K 120 HDR, and I literally, when they moved the jib, my stomach pulled in. Like, I was like, oh, like that like my brain does not like that at all. And so what happens though is that means that you can't shoot films the way you used to shoot them. You can't, it's not good for everything. But what it is good for is capturing life, around you. It's good for sports. It's good for concerts. It turns out it's really good for some people for horror, because it's really like you're there.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there's a couple things. There's a couple genres. Exactly. And so there's certain genres that 120 makes a lot of sense for, and then filmmaking generally it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like it's better to be it. And now the other interesting piece of this, as we geek out, is that 24 frames a second is evenly divisible into 120. So you could actually, there's some folks that for a couple of years, and a couple of us have been playing with, is you can shoot 120 and then use optical flow to use the frames that were in between that you're throwing away as to calculate the pixel vectors, so that you can put the motion blur back into the 24 frames a second. So you could shoot 120, have 120, but deliver it 24. Sorry.
There's a good, Red has a good description of this on their website, because I guess you can change this stuff. But
what made it make sense for me is the idea that just because it shoots 24 frames a second doesn't mean that each frame is 1/24th of a second open aperture, right?
Right.
So that's the difference. And if you think about photography, that could be blurrier or not.
Right.
And so if you could make it 1/24, or you could make it 1/48, or whatever else, and that was what made it all click. And I had never thought of that before.
All right, as long as we're talking about this,
thank you.
Complete digression. I'm watching Surface on Apple TV Plus. Have you seen this yet, Alex? I want you to watch this.
Haven't seen it.
Because it drives me. It's weird focus, and I think they're doing it on purpose, because it has to do with the story. Because a woman's memory she's got amnesia. Great. So they're playing with, like, the focus plane is not consistent. Like, so my eyes are being focused, my chin at the same focal plane would not be. It looks like tilt shift or something. It's
that sounds like a tilt shift where they're playing with the tilt.
Extremely disturbing. And I couldn't finish the first hour because not all shot that way. That's the other thing that's weird. And I guess it's probably her POV, maybe, that's that way. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the assignment for next week, just watch a few minutes. I'm just curious what's going on with that.
I've actually been looking at doing you can get some really cool tilt focus, and I've been looking at you can get a Canon mount, and so I've been looking at getting a bellows tilt, like not just a tilt focus, but like a true bellows camera.
Yeah, that's the real tilt shift.
To put on my Blackmagic camera, just to like shoot kind of fun shots of ants and things like that.
Yeah, because it makes them either look like toys or giants, or I don't know what they're trying to do with it. It's making me nauseated.
Not happy.
So I couldn't finish it. And maybe it's just me. I mean, obviously it must just be me, but I'm just curious.
A lot of people have different sensitivities to it. Like some people really don't like handheld. Like
I'm used to that now. I didn't like it for a long time.
Everyone was like complaining about it. I thought it was great. But
now we're used to it.
Like it.
Now it signifies this is real. It's the cinema verite. Mm-hmm. No, The Office is a documentary. Really, honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Battlestar Galactica really happened in space.
Yeah, totally did.
Okay,
Those
totally.
are actual shots from space.
Which one?
Oh, yeah, good question. Ooh, there's more
my
than,
God.
ooh.
I have a slight digression that's related to this, which is my friend Todd Vaziri, who works at ILM. He has a great Twitter account, T Vaziri. He talks about these things that they don't talk about enough, which is how do you do a special effect where you need to have a clean visual of the person in the shot in order to do your VFX replacement, but it's almost totally dark. Oh. And he had a couple examples on his Twitter feed that blew my mind, because what they did is they shot it at double frame rate and had a strobe light essentially firing off at half the frame rate.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Which meant, and I could not even believe that this is something you could do, but the speed of light, it turns out, is really fast, is every other frame was perfectly lit. And then the off frames were dark like they wanted it, which means they were able to de-interleave those frames and have the exact same scene lit and not lit, and so they could use the lit version to do all of their VFX for reference and put it in the dark shot for the final.
Oh, brilliant.
And that this is a technique apparently that has it's not super common, but when you get to high frame rates, these things that seem completely impossible that Alex talks about are entirely possible once you can capture that many frames of reality and slice it however you want. The idea that you can do that just blows me away.
It's exciting. It's an exciting time to do this stuff. It's a lot of data. Like all these things just keep on. Like we start capturing it. I've been doing some tests at 8K 120 even, and it's a gigabit per second. And that's heavily compressed. That's like 12 to 1.
Actually, that raises
12 to 1 compression is a gigabit per second.
That's going to get us back on track. So thank you. By the way, TVAZIRI is his Twitter account.
You must follow.
And he's a prolific tweeter. So
he's great.
Really good.
Yeah.
Loves movies.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this brings me to, and you actually brought this up in the Discord, Jason, Lightning not really being a fast enough transfer for some of these higher frame rate, higher bit rate stuff. Is this the last iPhone with Lightning?
Yeah.
Probably.
I think probably it is.
Yeah.
I think all the rumors are that they're going to go to USB-C next year.
The rumor is also the iPad 10, which is the base model, will also be USB-C this year. So
it's time. It's time. Lightning. Keep in mind, Lightning was invented at a time when Apple was frustrated that the USB-C stuff was just not going to happen fast enough, and so they made their own thing that did what USB-C would do, but a couple of years later. And so Apple was out there first. And then they got in so much trouble with people angry that all of their docks and cables and stuff didn't work that I think they've just sort of like left it on the table. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I feel like we're at the point now where Apple, has almost moved everything to USB-C or Thunderbolt with the USB-C connector, right? And so it seems like it's time. And that doesn't necessarily mean faster connections, but if Apple is going to have an iPhone Pro that shoots 8K at high frame rate or whatever, it might be something where they roll in the fastest wire transfers that they can to get that data off as well. But that's next year. That's not rumored for this year.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Pro version ends up with USB-C or Thunderbolt.
You think
whatever.
this year?
Thunderbolt, and then the regular version ends up with nothing. Like, it's just like we're going to get rid of the connector altogether.
That would be next year, though, not this year.
Yeah, next year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a complete believer in the no connector rumor. I know it's out there, and I'm sure it's a dream for somebody at Apple. It's like, oh, the portless iPhone. But like, there are so many things that are enabled, like bad things in terms of fixing a broken phone by plugging it in. Although I have the one theory is that they're going to do a smart connector or something. So there is a way to get data off of it via something like they have on the iPad, but it's not a plug like it used to be. But yeah, I think at least some of these models are going to have a USB-C, and they're going to be able to do fast data transfer, because if you're shooting all of that video, you're going to want to get it off of there. Wi-Fi is not going to do it.
So let's move to, and then maybe they'll do AirPods in September, AirPod update, which I for some reason just couldn't care less. But anyway, if you care, September, right, would be when you'd get new AirPods.
It's funny. I love my AirPods, and now I have different headphones that I use for different things, and the one that I use the least is my AirPods.
Yeah. By the way,
I've had, I have different reasons to use different ones.
It's the winner of the most used earbuds on national television.
There you go.
Easily.
You can easily tell. I mean, there's no reason to put them on except for it's an easy way to communicate you're on headphones is because you got something really white that's
white
sticking out
in my ear. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then October would be, will they announce the Mac Pro?
I don't know about that.
They gotta do it this year.
Rumors are that they decided to build it on the M2 instead of the M1, and that gives them a little more time. I think they'll probably announce it by the end of the year, but they might. It's possible. It sounds like that's going to be a Mac and iPad event in October that they're going to do. And
new
do
laptops,
the OS releases and new hardware.
M2 laptops, yeah.
Right.
And for people who are holding off on the M2s now because of thermals, presumably the MacBook Pro 14 and 16 will have fans and be less thermally constrained.
I mean, the M1s are already faster than those systems. That shouldn't be the reason you're holding off.
So
but
weird.
Yeah, there will be presumably an M2 at some. Well, no, I don't think it's that weird. I mean, the M1 Pros and Maxes and Ultras are all way faster than that. The M1 is a consumer chip. The M2 is a consumer chip. That's what they're made for. They're not made to do more than that. But yeah, I mean, it would be.
That's confusing to people.
Right?
People say it's one better in their minds.
It's one better, isn't it?
Yeah, so I think it's confusing to normal people. Anybody who listens to our shows now, I think by now understands.
Yeah. It's a challenge for them, and I think that's one of the reasons why they want to get the updates out there as fast as they can. But
because once the whole line is M2,
again.
then you can say, "Oh, this is faster, this is faster, this is faster." You can kind of see it, but now you don't. You're missing that high-end M2 part.
Yeah. We're looking. Apple has to meet its promise of having the entire line updated by the end of this year. That would mean that we have to see a Mac Pro announced. I don't think we'll see one released this year. I think we'll see very, 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 very late in the year. We're going to actually see this thing actually exist. I'm most interested to see how soon Apple's going to produce the first for real Apple Silicon Mac Mini. Because the Apple Studio isn't a Mac Mini, it's a Mac Studio. I'm keen to see the one that doesn't necessarily cost $3,000, but it's the $1,500, $1,200, $1,300 mini desktop Mac that has not the MacBook Air Generation 1 Apple Silicon, but I can configure it how I want. I can get the CPU I want. I can basically turn this into a desktop sub-pro level workhouse because I really think that's the bread and butter of Mac desktops right there, the Mac Mini. And I know that Alex is a big fan of having all the toaster slots filled with Mac Minis, each one chugging away, doing their own things.
There's so much. I think at one time, my last company, I think we probably had near 30 of them, and they're just glue for all kinds of things. And now they're so much better. I only have, I think personally, I only have 8 of them, but I think that maybe 9.
Is it a mistake of me to think of the Mac Studio as just a Mac Mini, a swole Mac Mini?
It is, but I think there's room for something below it, right? Like the Apple, like they still had the Mac Mini and then the Intel Mac Mini that was more powerful, right? I feel like Andy is looking for the thing that's not just. I think there will be an M2 Mac Mini, but I think everybody's hoping there will be an M2 Pro Mac Mini, which is just a little bit up because there's no M1 Pro desktop at all, right? You are either at Max or Ultra, or you're down at M1. And so for M2, I think everybody's hoping there'll be something that is an affordable desktop, probably a Mac Mini, and ultimately an iMac at some point, right? That has that extra power of the M2 Pro, or maybe even optionally the Max, in that Mac Mini shape. And then the Studio is up at the high end, right? It's Max and Ultra if it sticks around, because especially that Ultra chip needs an enormous amount of cooling. But there's room in there for a more powerful Mac Mini that's not a Mac Studio.
That's why it's swole for the additional cooling.
$2,000 for the one with no air conditioning and the factory stereo. That's not the position that the Mac Mini has always had. The Mac Mini has always. I've always been so impressed with the range of customers that the Mac Mini supports. It supports the person who wants a Mac with the minimum buy-in, so you can get one that would be perfectly useful. Won't be terribly powerful, but perfectly useful for $600, $700, $800. But then there are going to be the ones like me who are going to really spec it up past the $2,000 range, and this one is going to have maximum storage, maximum RAM, the beefiest processor that doesn't require like a hover skirt around it for cooling, all that sort of stuff. So that's why I really think I've got the Mac Studio in abeyance, but I really do think that when Apple comes out with a modern Mac Mini on Apple Silicon, that's where this money that's taped to the bottom of my desk is going to go.
The Intel model's still for sale at $1,000. They put it down on the page, but that's Apple saying hold this spot, right? Because we know that the M1 Mac Mini is not powerful enough for a lot of the Mac Mini tasks, and I feel like that's absolutely what's going to slide on in there. Is there'll be an M2 Pro for $1,000-ish Mac Mini. Because I think Mac Mini starts at $600 or $700 right now for the M1. Yeah. So, and then the Intel one can finally go off the price list.
Yeah,
I have to admit that the reason I have so many is that it's not like I bought them all. Well, I bought a bunch of them at one time, but most of them I bought like 6 of them at one time. I find myself going, oh, I just need one more thing to do the thing. And at $600 or $700, I'm like, oh, just buy another one of these and we'll call it a day. And so it's not like. If it's $2,000, I'm like, no, I can't do that. Like it was a lot. I spent $3,000 on the Max, right? I didn't get the Ultra Studio, and I was like, oh, I haven't spent this much money on a computer for a long time. I could have owned 4 or 5 Mac Minis for the same one. This one better be good, and it's proven to be really good. But it was, I think that that the Mac Minis, there's so many things you can do with it. I'd much rather have. When I look at a $2,000 laptop, I'd much rather have 3 Mac Minis. Than the laptop
in a trench coat.
Well,
yeah, exactly. Well, I don't travel very much anymore. I so I don't really care about laptops. Like laptops are like, okay.
Because you never know where you're going to be shot at. So you got to have a Mac Mini in every pocket just to make sure that you're covered.
It would take a bullet for you. So that is
exactly
that could be their new
slogan. At home, like just think. I think for those of us working at home now, because I work at home most of the time. Just think about how often you take that laptop out in the woods.
Very rarely.
Out into the hinterland.
My laptop is portable only so I can go from the living room to the bedroom to the kitchen. That's the portability I'm looking for.
See, and the reason that I like a Mac Mini is because I don't do that. So it is when I walk out of my office.
You just have one in every room, so you don't have to carry it around.
No. When I walk out of my office, the most advanced thing outside of my office is my Apple TV. Like my office is where I work, and the rest of my world is my phone. Okay. I spend a lot of time on my phone, but I don't like having computers outside the office because then I work all the time.
It's my security blanket. I can't go anywhere without a laptop under my arm. Anywhere. Phone is not big enough for me. I need more real estate. Speaking of which, whither the large screen iMac, is that gone forever? Are we going to stuck with 24 inches forever?
I think it's a whole display.
Yeah, Mark Gurman says that it's coming, but it's just late.
But where and when and how?
Good question. I hope soon, but it sounds like not soon. It makes me very sad too. I mean, I bought an external display in a Mac Studio, and I'm pretty happy with it. But I was a 27-inch iMac user for many years there, and if they had made an M1 Pro 27-inch iMac, I would have bought it, and they haven't. Gurman says it might even be M3 before we see it. Although I think it's going to be next year, and I think it'll probably be an M2 Pro 27-inch iMac, and they'll call it iMac Pro for kicks, and we'll be happy.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my guess.
I think that maybe the large screen iMacs are a device whose time has passed. It is kind of heartbreaking to consider that, boy, when that thing gets out of date, either because the CPU is not up to the task anymore, can't run the latest OS, or simply that, okay, well, guess what, you just lost your SSD and now you're close enough into end of life on this device that you kind of want to buy a new one rather than get a motherboard swap. It's really heartbreaking. You're throwing away
that beautiful
power
monitor.
Supply, huge screen, all of this stuff. Yeah. When you could, if you had just gotten a Mac Mini and a display, even if you're not necessarily, even if it's time for you to upgrade the display too, well, great. Now your kids get a monitor upgrade on their gaming setup. It just there are things that just seem like. In so many circumstances, a big screen iMac is just wasteful, and it's not going to deliver the advantages of here's a compact, just like the original Mac from 1984, and the way that every low-level Mac and iMac has been since. The concept that at some point you can grab it, pick it up, move it to another room, and then congratulations, now you've got. If you're too sick to get out of bed, now it's on your nightstand, and you can actually be gaming or whatever in bed, put in the kitchen, whatever. That's that's what you use a small screen iMac for. I just don't see what the large screen iMac is going to be for in the future.
All our old iMacs go to John so he can do things like run his house automation and stream TWiT on a beautiful 5K monitor.
A brain the size of a planet, and now they've just got me showing what the weather is today and a picture of the grandchildren.
I have old stuff, like old iPads and old Mac Minis and old. I mean, I have my little telestrator that I use here. It's like a 2012 Mac Mini.
Yeah,
this, they're just laying around. It's not like I went out and
it's
bought
good
it,
if you have little jobs that they can do, but it just feels sad. Like
it's like a Raspberry Pi, but it was just laying around.
Yeah, it's like a $5,000 Raspberry Pi.
Well, no, but it's not anymore. It's now.
But it was. Is the point? That's the point. It was.
But the way the Raspberry Pis sell for right now, it's probably the resale price.
Literally, I think, John, are you using a Mac, an iMac to stream? No, you use a Raspberry Pi for that. Yeah. But you do other things with the iMacs, I know.
But I would also like to think that people are...
They're mostly replaced.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I would also like to think that people are going to be clever enough to take advantage of continuity in the future to say that, well, maybe I'm not going to turn my first generation Apple Silicon Mac Mini into a media server in the living room. Maybe I'm going to keep it like I'm going to have a stack of two, and I'm going to have its own separate monitor right next to the monitor for the brand new Mac Mini that I just bought. And the fact that I can simply use one keyboard and mouse sort of invisibly between these two, I can now, whenever I'm ripping a DVD or a Blu-ray or doing a big transcode, it's basically these extra processors also happen to have their own cooling, their own power supply, their own data channel, everything. The flexibility of having this, again, to snap another red Lego brick onto the stack. If you have these devices, I mean, $3,000 for a Mac Studio or $3,000 worth of Mac Minis, which you can then deploy and redeploy like nanites exactly where you need them to go. That's an interesting proposition.
Well, October will be interesting. And we'll have lots to talk about then.
And expensive, I'm guessing, for me.
Yeah. Well, I think September is going to be expensive because I skipped. I have an iPhone 12 and a Series 7 or Series 6, I guess. So I skipped last year.
I start saving up about now.
Yeah.
Like I just go,
put your pennies aside, kids.
And with the phone, I've definitely learned to get the phone that I have now, the 13, is going to go to my wife, who doesn't like to spend money on phones, and I'm like, but the pictures are so much better.
We do have we have a nice hand-me-down system. None of this gets wasted. It's the very end of the hand-me-down that Lisa calls, I can't remember.
Those are good.
Swappa
Atomic
or whatever.
Clock.
Yeah,
it's good. Atomic clock.
There you go.
You put it on there.
The poor person at the end of the food chain has to like come up to you and say, yeah, but this is a gray SCSI Terminator. I need the black SCSI Terminator because this is a 2FX.
I gave my son one of my old iPhone 10, and I gave my daughter the iPhone 12 Pro, and he's like, why did that happen? And I was like,
why do we get the 10?
I was like, because I've seen what your phone looks like. I mean, the button was hanging out.
No, what you tell him is the greatest
like,
iPhone they ever made was the iPhone 10.
No, I said if you can make it a couple weeks, because I have some old ones.
I have another one
for testing.
Yeah,
I'll just give you another old, but I'll give you an old one. But I can if you crack that one, I will not feel horrible.
We practically have a lab set up when the new iPhones come in, where we take the SIMs out, put it in the new one, pass it down, and then various family members are at the table, and this old one goes to him, and then it's hysterical.
But that's also why I've gotten into. I put it in a case. I put a screen protector on it. I'm not going to be the only one that uses this in the family.
It has a future.
And so it's going to go out with a case, and your job is to keep it that way until the next one. And exactly what you're talking about. Trying to keep them feeling like they're new.
So you see, periodically, I will pick Alex's brain for things like whatever the hell 180-degree shutter is. You can do that yourself this Thursday. Alex is doing an AMA, the rescheduled AMA, 9 a.m. Pacific. That's noon Eastern time. That's 1600 UTC. If you're in Club TWiT, that's the deal. And then the following week, I'm excited. Stacey Higginbotham's book club will be doing Clara and the Sun. Still time to read it. It's not a long book, but it's sure a great book. Highly recommend it by Ishiguro. That's just one of many things that goes on in the club, and I wanted to use this time to solicit your membership. Club TWiT is $7 a month. People told us on the cruise, they said, you should really raise that. Nope, we're not going to raise it. We think it's we want everybody to be a member, everybody who can afford it. So if you can afford a couple of lattes a month, what do you get? Ad-free versions of all the shows. You get access to this Discord, which is more than just events. It's a conversation space on all kinds of topics, not just even the shows. And then the TWiT Plus feed, which has all the stuff that we don't actually get into the shows, and there's a lot of it, pre and post show, and special shows like the Untitled Linux show, the Hands-on Mac, Hands-on Windows, both of which are club only right now. Stacy's Book Club, same thing, the Giz Fizz. We have a lot of shows that are in that TWiT Plus feed. $7 a month for that. And let me tell you why it's important to us. For instance, here's an example. Today on MacBreak Weekly, there was one ad. So that means there's a shortfall, and the club members really help us make up that shortfall. It's very up and down. The ad business right now is in kind of complete turmoil. We realized that the ideal way to do what we do would be with listener support. So this is how we're doing it. We didn't take away anything from people who listen to the free feeds. Those are all there, but we have started adding things because the club helps us pay for it. So if you're not a member of the club, please think about it. Go to twit.tv/clubtwit. There's monthly, there's annual, there's corporate memberships, and you can buy shows individually. For instance, if you just listen to MacBreak Weekly, the ad-free version of MacBreak Weekly is less than $3 a month. So all of that is at twit.tv/clubtwit, and we really thank you for that. Coming up, let's talk about ads. ATT, application tracking, what is it? Application tracking transparency. Kind of in the news for two reasons. One, Apple is about to add new ad units. Mark Gurman, Bloomberg, Apple finds its next big business showing ads on your iPhone. Oh, great. And then along with that, by the way, that hasn't happened yet, but Gurman says Apple is set to expand ads to new areas of your iPhone and iPad in search of the next big revenue driver. But there's also an interesting piece about the effectiveness of ATT. This is on Nick Here's Pixel Envy blog. Ad tech revenue statements indicate unclear effect of ATT. Facebook and everyone else very quick to say, oh, we're going to lose $10 billion thanks to Apple allowing you to turn off tracking. But at the same time as that happened, COVID happened. The recession, currency fluctuation, supply chain issues, all of these things affected the market. And there is some evidence that ATT did not have as much of a negative effect as some are claiming. One of the points of evidence here is that the iPhone is much more popular than Android only in North America. Everywhere else, the reverse is true. And yet, so in other words, ATT is only mostly available to people in North America, yet these same revenue drops occur globally. So one would expect North American revenue would fall faster in Q3, but it's not exactly the case. So there's other headwinds. It's another cocktail of headwinds, as Luca Maestri might say. Yes, that refreshing cocktail. What do you guys think of all that?
Well, speaking of headwinds, that's an interesting thing to evaluate because Facebook and Meta, Facebook/Meta. I'm sorry, it's like using Photoshop as a trademark verb. I am not. You can tell me to call Facebook Meta. I will not do that. But during their earnings call, that's one of the things they specifically mentioned as a problem that they're facing, a headwind that they're facing in the future.
Yet, let me just throw this in: their yearly revenue decline was $1 billion in Europe. $600 million in North America. It was worse in Europe, where ATT is not a problem.
Yeah, but I'm sorry. What I was going to say is that they have to be really, really careful about what they say during an earnings call, because that could really trip them up into legal consequences later on. So I wonder where they got that data from, if they felt as though they were confident enough to assert that during an earnings call, or maybe I'm just misremembering.
Well, yeah, I want to read the exact verbiage, because they may have weaseled it, right? I can't remember what the exact verbiage is.
I'm searching for it right now to see for the transcript.
Yeah. Let's see, 2022 Q2. I've got a PDF, unfortunately, of the Q2 2022 earnings presentation from Meta. I wonder if they. Well, this is just these are just slides, so there's not gonna. Yeah, you need the transcript of what they said. I mean, obviously, Meta hates application tracking transparency.
Yeah.
They hate it.
Yeah.
Obviously.
So Ben Thompson wrote a piece on Stratechery the other day that said that Nick Heer's argument is a little bit weak because he doesn't factor in the strength of the dollar and the size of the iPhone market share in the different regions, and that if you adjust for currency and then you consider the iPhone market share being so great in the United States, and then you factor in things like maybe the Ukraine war, what Ben basically says is, look, I'm sympathetic with the idea that app tracking transparency is a good policy, but if you look at the results, we cannot pretend that it didn't have an impact. It seems to have had an impact, and that the argument, you could make the numbers look like they didn't, but if you adjust for currency valuation and adjust for how many iPhones there are in the North American market, then it sounds like it actually did have an impact to Meta's business, for sure.
I love Ben, and I trust him, but I think we need some economists to really weigh in on this and get all the data and really get some idea.
Sure.
Of this.
I think it's more like Nick here says this, Ben Thompson says this.
Yeah.
I think we can't.
And some of Ben's argument is,
any of them with
well, it's just not intuitive that ATT would have had an effect. But,
I guess I would say, as the user, regardless of the effect, I think I have the right to say I don't want to be tracked.
Yeah. I don't think anybody's saying Apple shouldn't have that switch. Apple should.
If it lit the Meta offices on fire, I don't care.
Right.
Like I don't care.
No,
I want to be able to say, we as the data collection on us keeps on increasing, I think we have to increasingly have, my question is whether ATT went far enough.
But I think here's the point.
When you say,
here's the point of all of this argument from the consumer's point of view is, does ATT really accomplish anything? If it didn't hit ad markets in the way that Facebook's whining about, then ATT isn't really accomplishing anything. It's window dressing.
Well, I think that I think this is the beginning of Apple going down a path, not the end.
Yeah,
so I think when we say, well, it doesn't have, the thing is, if Apple went all the way that they could go in 1 year, there'd be congressional meetings and there'd be a bunch of other things. There already are, right, based on some of this stuff. And so I think what you're seeing is, Apple slowly circling the wagons around, like, we're going to keep on turning this dial up. We're going to make it allow you to be more private. We're going to we're going to allow you to say, I don't want to be part of these things. I'm going to turn this off, this off, this off. But they can't do it all at one time. And so, yeah, sure, it's not going to have the impact that it can have. But I think that as you look at the overall view of what Apple's doing, we're going to let you hide your email. We're going to let you opt out of ATT. We're going to let you close down your phone some more. We're going to, this is a, and I'm not saying that they're being altruistic or they're on our side. This is just their business model. Privacy is a business model that they're going to keep on moving down the path.
Oh, and by the way, I do have the transcript in front of me, and they do mention this 4 or 5 times. Zuck talks about doesn't mention the feature by name. They simply refer to iOS feature changes, Apple iOS rollouts, but they do refer to having targeting and measurement had significant headwinds as a result of these changes. But you're right. There is some weasel language in there, so that if they were to say that, oh well, we didn't actually say that this specific feature was dishing us.
It could also be the nearly universal use of ad blocking these days. It could be a lot of things. I mean, I use Firefox, which literally explicitly blocks Facebook. So, I mean, I think more and more it's a consumer revolt against tracking that really is going to hurt these companies.
And I think it had to do with just how crazy the companies got. Like, this was something that worked really well, and they just were like, well, we could connect it to what you're spending on. Like, we can connect it to when you're at Safeway, and what did you buy, and how do we add that to your profile, and who are you standing next to for a long period of time? Let's add that to your profile, and all the and what are you watching at home? Well, let's add that to your profile, and like, we can add all these things, and I think at some point, people started to get weirded out because, they were talking at a party with somebody and now they're hearing it and they think, well, Facebook must be listening to me, which is probably unlikely, actually. But it's because the other person who was talking about it did a search and you were standing next to them, and that they do. And so the thing is that it's just weird. It starts weirding people out. And the thing is that people say, well, that people we don't get relevant ads. I don't want relevant ads. Like I actually don't want those. Like I want them to be just ads towards me because it's easier for me to ignore them. And I don't want things that catch my eye. I don't want things to go, ooh, I'm now going to waste 3 minutes looking at something I didn't need until I saw the picture. Like I don't really want that as a consumer anymore.
Yeah. I
used to think that was going to be cool, and now I don't.
It's too bad. They really wasted a golden opportunity because if in the abstract, if you've seen this television commercial in the 1980s that had this vision of the future and say, now instead of being inundated with ads all over your newspaper and ads all over your postal box, what if if they know that you're shopping for a pair of snow tires, and when there's a really good sale on snow tires, it'll basically alert you that, hey, here's this store nearby that has the snow tires of your rare style and rare size, and it's nearby, and we want to connect you to a local retailer. And that's all possible, and they could have done that, but they overreached, and now it really is so intrusive that they're packaging and selling so much information on such a mercenary level. It's like they feel as though you're cheating them if you are not exposing as much of your life to these marketing agencies as possible. Ben
Thompson also points out, and I think this is an important point, that app tracking transparency does not mean what you think it means. He has a long discussion of, he says, a lot of the most ardent defenders of Apple's ATT are against targeted advertising as a category, which is to say they're against companies collecting data and using that data to target ads. He says that's not Apple's definition. That's not what Apple is doing. ATT is about tracking is only when data Apple collects is then linked with data from third parties for targeted advertising or measurement, or when data is shared or sold to data brokers, which admittedly is the worst kind of ad tracking. That's what ATT does. But Apple says the data that they collect and use for advertising, that's not tracking. That's not what we're talking about. And this comes down to the fact that Apple is going to start doing more advertising.
Apple considers it third-party ads, and Apple considers all of the data it can collect about you as an Apple user, from your behavior in the App Store, what apps you've downloaded, what subscriptions you have, anything, your Apple Maps searches, anything that it collects about you as an Apple customer, it can build a profile for you. And it
we've said
can change the content
and
based on that. That's what because it's a first-party relationship, and that's their argument. Which there are only so many first-party relationships. There's kind of iOS and
that's
Android.
Why they're being investigated over ATT by the EU. You would think the privacy regulators at EU would say, "Oh, this is a good thing," but what they're saying is it really is just advantaging first-party companies like Apple, Amazon, Google, because they have their own data. It's only disadvantaging third-party tracking. And so they're saying it's Apple's self-dealing. It's self-dealing on Apple's part. This is all to their benefit.
I think that, but I think that, again, I think you could have Apple users decide, like, do you want Apple to track you? Do you want to block?
Well, that's a button we'd like to see, but there is no button.
There is a feature.
Right.
That feature actually does exist. There is a don't personalize ads in iOS. It is buried, but it is there.
Okay.
So you can turn it off. And I think the key point with all of this is it's not just self-serving, right? It is self-serving. It is also, I believe that Apple does believe what it says about privacy and about not being tracked. However, there are also people at Apple who realize that creates an opportunity for Apple as a trusted first-party source of information to make money selling ads itself, right? It's a little bit from column A and a little bit from column B. I think both are true. It's like, like with so much where people say, oh, Apple cares about your privacy, that's just marketing. It's like, well, no, it's not just marketing. But it is marketing too. It's both of those things.
But again, the third party is important though, in the sense that the idea is Facebook can still track you and they can still look at what you like and all those other things while you're in Facebook, and that's not when you turn ATT on, what it does turn off is they can't keep on selling all that and, making you, basically cutting your information up into little blocks and selling it and trading it with everybody else. And that is the thing that is, really, I mean, it's not just self-dealing. There's a huge difference between first party and third party. First party is you are in this platform, whether it's Facebook or Google or whatever, and that is the trade-off that you made.
Yeah.
Third party is whoring you out to everybody
Absolutely.
else, like while you're sleeping.
Absolutely.
And
the data
so
brokers
are very
huge
different
problems.
World.
Yeah,
it is. It should be. It's evil. And first party is I'm in Facebook. I know that Facebook's going to follow me. I know they're going to try to customize my, my feed and everything else, or I'm using Google. And it's not just self-dealing. It is self-dealing. I mean, first party is, I agree as a user visually, I understand that I'm in this space and I'm getting tracked or I'm using these services, and that's the trade-off. Third party is like a whole different thing. It's waking, it's all your data being just pushed out into all these different, data brokers and everything else. And we have, again, some people may choose that that's fine with them. It turns out about 30% think that that's fine, and that's great, but for those of us who want to choose to not be there, we should have the right to do that.
It ties into this article by Felix Krauss on his blog, kraussfx.com, iOS privacy. What a surprise. Instagram and Facebook can track anything you do on any website in their in-app browser. Well, duh. I guess if you didn't know this, when you use the browser in Facebook and Instagram, you're not actually using a third-party browser. You're using Facebook and Instagram. And even though ATT is turned on and Apple runs WebKit, the nature of the code is that all third-party links and ads within their app using this custom browser will tell them everything.
And I would know very little, because the one thing is I still use Facebook. Like, I still go up on my computer.
Yeah.
I took all the Meta apps off my phone because of the battery life. The battery life is literally twice as long. Without as an example,
the Instagram app injects JavaScript code into every website shown, including when clicking on ads, which gives Facebook that information about everything you're doing on all those other sites. But when I saw this, I thought, well, I didn't even want to include it in the rundown. I thought, well, doesn't everybody know that? No.
Yeah.
No. Nobody knows it. So just be aware, when you're using Facebook properties, they're first party.
Yeah. Well, I really wish that there was some sort of a dingus that made it really, really explicitly clear that you have not left this app. It did not open this link inside the Safari browser. No, you do not have all the safety, security, and protections of the Safari browser. You are still in the realm of Meta World, and its Meta World is still a dangerous and smelly place.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that I wouldn't be surprised that if Apple didn't add that to it. It's just that, again, you're slowly closing. You're just slowly closing the door.
That. Yeah.
But we talked about this, I think, in the past. Like Secret Service, when they close up a space, it's like they close these streets and then these streets, and they slowly go around.
Yeah.
And then they put the metal detectors in, and now no one can do it any other way. And so I think what we're seeing is Apple's just building a perimeter. And at some point they'll just keep tightening it probably for the next decade until it's pretty locked down.
Andy, you still post on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
Would you consider getting rid of your Instagram account?
It gives me too much pleasure because I have a lot of parasocial relationships on Instagram that I really, really enjoy, and that would be I'm getting something that is worth the abuse that I'm getting from Facebook. It's not a terribly unfair trade.
Do you use it on your phone or do it like Alex does, just on the browser, on the desktop?
I do it on my phone because I'm taking pictures on the phone as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I don't. I've never had never once have I had the Facebook app on any of my.
I don't even have a Facebook account,
or anything like that.
But I feel like if I have an Instagram account, I might as well have a Facebook account, right?
Yeah, I mean, you can't get around it. And to be fair, every time this topic comes up, I have to remind myself that I think Facebook is just a terrible company. I think that they take joy in saying if you put a barrier, if I explicitly as a user put up a barrier that says that I do not want you to cross this barrier, they'll nod and say, okay, well, obviously the job for me now is to figure out a way around this barrier. And it's just ignorant, and it's just terrible, and it's adversarial relationship. But my real adversaries here are the independent data brokers, because Google's I use a lot of Google products. I have a Google phone. I love it. I think it's a great transaction for me. But also part of the reason why I quote trust unquote Google with my data is that it's too valuable for them to sell it to anybody else. They'll use it to help target ads, but they're never going to sell my personal information to anybody else. Whereas all these other stupid little rat-like data collection companies, if someone wants to know, hey, does Andy have any serious illnesses, and if so, where has he been getting treatment for those serious illnesses? They will, even though there are laws protecting my medical history, there will be data aggregators that will be able to systemically figure out that we can't determine exactly what his situation is, but yes, he is regularly seeking medical treatment for one or more serious diseases, and that's just not right. Where does he live? Where is he liable to be at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday? How did he vote? These are all things that can be collected and simply bought and sold like potato chips. And that is why it's just a terrible, terrible time to live in, lacking any legal protections against abuse of my private information.
Any other thoughts? Do you still use Instagram, Jason Snell?
Yeah, but occasionally, and I can't deactivate my Facebook account entirely because I have a MetaQuest, and you've got to have one. But I basically
that's, by the way, why
everything.
I don't have a Quest.
Yeah, it's too good. I have to have it. But I very rarely go on Facebook. I very rarely go on Instagram, although I do occasionally. I don't like Facebook as a company, but I think that there is something to the idea that there are first-party relationships you have with companies that you can choose to trust, and that is not the same as companies facilitating the compilation of a profile, of a dossier about you based on everything you do on the internet. And I think that we can debate whether either of those are great, but one of them is clearly worse than the other one, and I think everybody would agree on that.
I doxed myself last night. I thought I should see what is out there about me. I went to one of these sites where you pay them $25 and they will do a background check. There's nothing about me you can't find out.
Yeah.
Nothing.
Yeah, and it's, and again, this can already affect your employment status. It can already affect.
Well, there are laws against you which is weird. We can't do a background check before hiring somebody, which is weird. Right. But that's the prospective employee is protected by privacy rules. In fact, on these sites, you have to say, no, I'm not using this for employment.
Right.
Just stalking.
I'm just stalking.
Exactly.
Just stalking myself. It's bad. There are no secrets.
Yeah, right. And I think that, again, we have, there aren't, and you shouldn't assume that you're private. Like, that's definitely something you should keep out of your head. But I also think that that we should keep on being able to be given more and more choice over how much we want to check in, and how much we check out. That's all I'm saying. I don't have a thing. I mean, I have a lot of friends that work at Facebook, and I know a lot of good people that are doing good things there, and it's not, but the problem is their business model is based around our privacy, and so that we're just at a at a fracture point in that area. I still have accounts on everything. Anytime a new social network comes up, I open it up, I keep it there because I just don't know whether I'll need it later. But at the same time, I spend very little time. I think the only one that I spend particularly any amount of time on is Twitter, and mostly because it's really short. Like, I don't have to.
I ain't got time
and it has a great filter. Well, it's also got a great filter. Like we've talked about in the past, I've got 150 terms that are mostly political that I don't see. So my version of Twitter is so much nicer than everybody else's, evidently, because people get so upset, and I'm like, I don't even know what is happening.
Yeah.
So it's good.
Block and mute and filter.
Oh yeah,
it's a wonderful thing. All right, I think we should probably, since it's getting late, getting time to pick our picks of the week. If you all agree, unless there's something I missed that you really want to talk about. I did want to talk about NASA sending an iPad to the moon, but we'll do that next week. Got to save something for next week. We're going to be just as short of stories.
That's been around for they've been saying they're going to do that. They might actually do it sometime.
Yeah, end of the month supposedly.
The SLS. Yeah, I know. Hopefully we'll get there.
Artemis, an iPad so that Cisco, which is paying for this, WebEx can call Amazon Echo and ask it a question. Yeah. And by the way, it says in an industry-funded experiment, which tells me that Cisco, Amazon probably paid for it. I wonder if Apple doesn't pay for product placement. But I note that all these stories mention the iPad, so
it's usually supporting NASA with what it does is usually seen as kind of a wholesome. It's wholesome. Yeah,
it's wholesome. Mm-hmm.
How much money was spent creating a Pepsi and Coke dispensers that would work on the space shuttle? A lot of money, man.
Wait a minute. They have Pepsi and Coke dispensers on the space shuttle?
Coca-Cola actually funded an actual fountain drinks dispenser that actually flew on the shuttle. They were also I think both Coke and Pepsi created, if you Google it, created cans with built-in hard plastic straws at the top of it so that you could enjoy a can of ice cold wonderful Coke in zero gravity on the shuttle. It'd be more fun to zip around the cargo bay with as a propulsion system, I think. But yeah, it wasn't. I don't think taxpayer funds went into the investigation, the development of this stuff. But yeah, it's a fun little thing. It's a little bit of a zest for the space program, a little bit of zest for the brand. And it's kind of fun to
Here it is.
At some point, if I spend $50 million, I'm going to be looking for that Coke dispenser.
It looks like a whipped cream dispenser.
Yeah,
it does.
You could be doing nitrous.
Coke's is a little bit different. It's the dispenser head is offset.
One giant sip for mankind.
Yeah, they're gonna be.
God bless capitalism.
Wow.
God bless it. I like it that they have the cap is on a string, though, so it doesn't go floating around.
There you go.
Yeah.
What does this mean? Usage conditions may apply.
I wonder if they went up and tested. They just went into a vomit comment and just let's see how this works.
Who wants a drink?
Yeah. Well, because as bad as it is to knock a sugar soda onto your keyboard here, imagine just having a small incident with this big Coke, this big cloud of sticky Coke, basically finding its way into things you need to get back home safely.
In 1980, this is, by the way, from the Air and Space Museum, and the object is not on display at the National Air and Space Museum. It is either on loan or in storage, according to the website. In 1984, researchers for Coca-Cola had an idea about dispensing carbonated beverages in space to give astronauts more choices to drink. And also to create a stellar advertising opportunity. The company developed a can that would work in weightlessness to keep the cola fizzy without spewing out of the can. NASA agreed to let the astronauts try the Coke device on a shuttle flight. When Pepsi learned of this project, it wanted to participate, developed its own container. Both Coke and Pepsi products were flown on STS-51-F in 1985 so that crew members could evaluate the dispensers and do a taste test. Results were mixed, and NASA did not add either company's product to the shuttle food pantry.
Yeah. Zero gravity messes with your sense of smell and taste too. So
COVID, huh?
Yeah, well, because there's airflow, right? That's different in zero G than it is in normal gravity. So apparently things taste weird.
Interesting. But don't go looking for this at the Udvar Hazy Center because it ain't on display.
Yeah.
It ain't there.
Oh, well, there was also on STS-77 the Coke, the actual fountain Coke machine that I was thinking about flew on STS-77 as described as the Fluids Generic Bioprocessing Apparatus 2.
Yep. It held 1.65 liters each of Coke. And Diet Coke.
The dispenser tested if carbonated beverage could be produced from separately stored carbon dioxide, water, and flavored syrups, and if the resulting fluids could be made available for consumption without foam formation.
Just like
Unfortunately,
In-N-Out.
the FGBDA, yeah, exactly.
Wow.
But it really is. I don't know what Wendy's does in the ice machine to make that special kind of ice that they make in the dispenser. That's the selling point for me.
You can get that.
At the Wendy's.
You can get a desktop You can get a one that sits on a countertop that does the Wendy's ice.
Here is, by the way, I don't own it
because my wife won't give me the desk, but she won't give me the counter space. It's $550. In case you're wondering, it'll do it.
We'll get it here.
It's really great.
Let's get it here.
You should get it.
Is that all it is? $550? No,
it's like $550.
Bad for your teeth. Okay. Here's astronaut Curtis Brown preparing to activate the fluids generic bioprocessing apparatus 2 on the middeck. I note that it does have the name Coca-Cola right there and in prominent letters.
The full wave device as it is described.
Well, and the big thing is that not only did NASA most likely get a little scratch to put that in there, but they also got. I'm sure that Coca-Cola developed a whole bunch of technologies that were might be useful, and they probably spent $10 or $20 million on that NASA didn't have to spend to figure that out. So it's probably useful.
This is a picture I want to frame and put up somewhere. I just think that's a very. This is
Coke and a smile.
We thought it'd be HAL 9000. Instead, it's the fluids.
How do you get the Coke machine to work on?
I'm sorry, Dave. I only have Pepsi.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Also, the astronauts, I hope that they were fully briefed on this part of the mission because they would have had to bring their own quarters. Yeah. Imagine being a dime short for exact change.
He's got a pretty big fanny pack on those astronaut shorts. Maybe he has some quarters in there. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Picks of the week time. This show, I think we learned a lot about a lot of things on this show. That's all I'm going to say. That's all I'm going to say.
We grew as people.
Some of them are tangentially related to Apple.
Any tech podcast shades into sort of choose your own adventure territory in August.
Yeah.
The month before the last wave of
exactly. The wave is coming. Why don't you kick us off, Andy, with your pick of the week?
Mine is a very boring but, oh my God, useful app that's been around for 5, 6, 7 years called Folder Tidy, which tidies your folders. I'm the sort of guy who I'm always just buying 8 terabyte drives or 512 gigabyte Samsung T3 drives and just using it as just temporary storage or using it to free up space wherever. And it's just a bucket where I just toss things into. Then when it fills up, I disconnect it, put some half-hearted label on it, and put it in the closet. Folder Tidy really makes it quick and easy to automate the process of organizing the stuff that's just in whatever source folder or source volume you want to have. If it's as simple as saying, look, there's just this big pile of stuff where everything that I've downloaded or tried to get off of my MacBook to free up space just got dumped. So please put all the different file types in their own folders or separate them by dates. You can be a little bit more sophisticated. I download a lot of museum art, and almost always what designates a JPEG that is actually a piece of museum art from anything else that I might have downloaded or copied onto the drive, usually because it will have a date, and it usually will not be in the 21st century. So you can add filters and add specifications. Say, oh, by the way, if it is a JPEG or a PNG file and it has a string of digits that are numbers that start with 19, please put it in a folder called Fine Art that you will then create. So it's not designed to be you have to understand this 3-ring binder worth of scripting language and tags and switches to make this work. It is very, very simple. Everything that it can do is right there in the interface, but it means that you can have truly, I've had it process 3 terabytes worth of files and reorganize them, and it takes just minutes to do because it's using every single new feature and leverage that the new file system of macOS has. And it's normally $10. I think it's on sale for $5 right now. And it is the sort of thing where I shouldn't need this app because I should be more organized and tidy so that I'm always simply putting files away to where they belong. But once again, every single time I've got 30 gigabytes or less of space free on my MacBook, it becomes the hurricane's coming. We got 20 minutes to fill up the back of the car with as many possessions as possible before we evacuate. And that's how I just find or copy things off there. This will actually straighten it out so that with very, very little effort, you can get things organized on your own. Good stuff.
Just before we go to another pick, thank you, Scooter X, in our chat room. There is a system issue on iCloud right now. If you go to Apple's system status page, some yellows under iCloud bookmarks, calendar, contacts, drive, keychain mail, storage upgrades, web apps, and photos. I don't know how extensive that issue is, but thank you, ScooterX, for pointing that out. Apple.com/support/system status. Your pick of the week, Jason Snell.
I am somebody who has read a lot about 3D printing stuff, but hasn't done any of my own. I don't own a 3D printer. I have not used a 3D printer. And every now and then I come up against something on the internet where they're like, oh, well, you can just do it with this little 3D printed part.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, great. How do I get that part? First, so step one, buy a 3D printer. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Forget it. So guess what? There's a site called CraftCloud 3D where you upload the 3D file that somebody has offered you, saying, just print this yourself. You upload it. You specify what materials, what standards, like all the little bits of which you do have to learn a little bit of 3D printing. And then it basically comes up with a list of people who will print it for you and mail it to you with different prices and different time frames. So you can pay like $40 and get it in 3 days, or $20 and get it in a week. Or, you can get it from these people in Texas or these people in Massachusetts, and you get to pick.
Oh, so this is really a brokerage. It's
a brokerage, for people
clever.
who are independently offering their services as 3D printers.
Some fool who bought a 3D printer now trying to amortize the cost.
Exactly right. And I have done this twice in the last month for a couple of different projects. And you know what? It was pretty great. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about if you don't order the sanded one, you have to sand it yourself, and that's not fun. So I ordered the sanded one the next time. But I learned a lot. I got stuff that totally did the job from what I wanted it to be.
You can get sterling silver. Look at that.
I just love the idea. You can pick your materials, and you will be your finished product. You upload the file, and then you just pick who you want and at the price that they are offering, and it works. And in fact, I even got a follow-up from CraftCloud where they said, you use somebody who was one of our new people, and it was an actual personal email saying, tell us how it went, because we evaluate all the new people who come into our system. So I had a really good experience with CraftCloud.
Boy, they have every they have steel, aluminum, brass, silver, all kinds of resins, titanium.
I mean, I just went with ABS plastic, right? But
yeah, that's the cheapest,
and you can choose your colors, and as you choose your materials, you get to choose colors, and you get to do all those things that 3D printer people might do. But I'm not going to buy a 3D printer, so I choose this method.
Cool.
Yeah, it's
and
cool
even
thing.
if you have a 3D printer, it's a good thing because you can you can print in so many things that. So I use one called Shapeways to do something relatively similar, and it's similar to CraftCloud. It's just that it's all one big company. You're not outsourcing to lots of people. It's just one big company that does the printing. But I might want something metal, but I definitely don't want a metal printer. I don't that's really expensive.
John's telling me we use Shapeways to make some of the parts for our ATEM. Was that for my little box switcher? Oh, that's cool. Burke used it.
But then what you do is you kind of iterate. You iterate with your home printer, and then you send it out and have it printed in something really great that you're never going to own.
Good one. Yeah, that's a good method too. Is if you do have a 3D printer, you use it as a prototyper, and then you get somebody who's going to do the metal one for you.
Exactly.
If I wanted to put it inside my body, I could use surgical resin. Nice.
There you go.
Okay. Or gold.
There's no telling what you might find out there on the internet. But if you're ever in a position where you're like, I'm doing this project and it sounds really cool, but now your step 7 is 3D print this thing, and you say to yourself, well, I'm not ever going to do that. You can get somebody to do it for you.
This is actually just fascinating for all the materials you can use.
Also, I'll put in a plug for your local library. A lot of libraries actually have 3D printers, so you should check with your local library. You may be able to just bring the file there and print it right at the library. So that's another thing to try.
Yeah.
But just one warning, like for people who's always been curious about 3D printing, it really is like owning a table saw. It's not like, oh great, I have this table saw, and now it'll cut everything I need for
what can I saw
for bookcases.
Yeah.
It's because the thing is, like, it is a tool, and the first prints you make from it are going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And then that's when you learn that even though you spent like $500 on this printer, the expectation is that you know how to take it apart and adjust it so that it works properly.
Right.
And then you know how to manage all of the settings, like what is the feed rate, what's the temperature, what have you got on the bed, how have you sliced it, all of this stuff. It's not going to be like hooking up a laser printer to your computer, and boom, in 10 seconds you get a printed copy of your document. You are responsible for getting this thing to actually work right, and the rules keep changing on you with every new thing that you do and every new material you try to print in. It's great, it's lovely, but don't expect that, hey, I spent $300 and now I'm going to be making Star Wars figurines from morning, noon, and night. Like, no, you're going to be making a blob of like weird oily string for at least 3 months, and each one of those bad prints costs you. And by the way, it'll be like a 2-day print, and it'll fail like 20 minutes before the end and actually ruin everything for you.
CraftCloud3D.com. Alex, Lindsay, pick of the week.
So my pick is this little guy right here. See this?
You bought it. We bought it. I've been reading about it.
So if you look at it, you can see that this
is the Insta360 link. It's kind of a gimbal for your webcam.
Look at it. It's
so cute. Around.
And it's so kawaii. So it's
Can we
much
see the
smaller
picture?
than it looks.
Can you switch the picture over?
Yeah, I'll switch the picture here. Let me. So this is. I just wanted to show you what it looked like, and then. Let me cut to the actual shot here. So here's a shot.
That's a pretty good shot.
Rumsleg hanging out and things. Yeah. So the key here is that you have a lot of controls. So
it's
so
a
I have
PTZ. You can zoom.
PTZ.
Too.
Oh yeah, I can definitely zoom in. Now I can also save presets, and so I can go. Okay, well I want this to be a preset, but I also want later I'm going to go in and zoom in. And I'm going to hit another preset here. And now if I hit this one, and you can see that you can put a lot of them in there. It cuts to it. It doesn't zoom in like but it will jump into it. So if you're trying to set up a presentation. Now, the other thing that you have here is, of course, you can move it around here, but you can also, again, just zoom here. And again, to reframe, you just grab it. Just move it around.
It also has tracking, right? So can you say follow Rumsleg and make him dance?
It won't follow Rumsleg, but it will.
Shoot.
You can have auto tracking, zoom, whiteboard. So it'll look at a white. You can put corners on a whiteboard, but look at all the thing to look at is, wow, does it have a lot of settings? Well, it's 4K, and also you have auto exposure. But when I turn off auto exposure, it has exactly
Oh, nice.
I have a little
a Bezier curve. Wow.
I have a little curve that I can, design design exactly how I want the contrast to work.
This is very pro.
I have control over my ISO, so I can drop my ISO down a little bit if I wanted to.
Yeah.
I have control over my shutter. And a lot of these have had these, but because they make the software, and this isn't limited to just what UVC will do, they've put a lot more into the camera. And you get into more settings here. You have how it's going to track, and the tracking, how fast you have manual
Is it
focus.
good in low light? They claim it is.
It is. It's actually, this is relatively low light now, and it's pretty good. Now, I can also turn it into HDR, which will make it a little grainier, but it's going to grab a lot more exposure there as well. Yeah. And so it is, so I buy a lot of these, cameras, and we test them, and I always think I'm going to send them back, but I never do. So I've got a pile of 4K web cameras, and what I will say is that it is, this is the first one that we've gone, maybe we'll get this instead of the Brio. And the Brio has been the one that has been like the standard, and we just use it. The color rendition is better.
Do you recommend the tripod kit, or?
I didn't. Did I get the tripod? I got the tripod kit.
It's $30 more.
I put it on a bunch of. It's $20 on the bottom. If you have something else, you can use it. The tripod is particularly special.
Yeah.
And so the it is it's a little bit more expensive. It's $300. I think this is $300.
Yeah, $300
for this kit. Yeah, $300. So I bought the $300 kit, and it is it's really, really good. In fact, if they made a $400 version with a 1-inch chip, this is a 1/2-inch chip. I'd pay, with an HDMI out, we put it in our ATEM. It's a great little PTZ. It is, if I was using, I'm going to take this. In fact, when I do the AMA with TWiT, I have to be in LA for that morning. I'm taking this with me, so I will be on
around. You can.
Yeah, so I'm gonna be on the AMA the first time I show it in public of it actually, because I have a 6K here, a Blackmagic 6K. I'm not gonna, but. This is my new trip camera. So this is what I'm taking with me on the road instead of the Brio. The Brio is going to be, I'm sure, very upset. They're like, why am I not going? And so anyway, but this is a good. If you play with it enough, it will it probably needs 1 or 2 more firmware updates where it'll crash and it'll just suddenly just wander off. But you just unplug it and plug it back in again. And that's happened like 3 times since I've started testing it over the last week. And it is a, but overall, it's just a killer little camera. Again, the quality is at least as good as the Brio, if not better. The color is better than the Brio. The controls are.
I love it that you can move around.
The
like,
best.
Do a presentation. And it's like you have a camera operator.
And that's what I'm using this for the most, is going to be doing presentation stuff. And I'm going to actually use this as my overhead camera. Like less me and more of like, this is what I want to show you a close of. But for a teacher or someone doing e-learning or talking about a product, I could totally see someone using 2 or 3 of these.
It has a desk view mode where auto corrects the parallax.
Yeah, so it's so I think that it is, if you're talking about your product, if you're interacting with clients or colleagues, if you are so you can see how it'll correct.
So he's using a hand gesture,
and then it just goes, I'm going to go over there
to go to the preset.
Wow! And it'll corner pin and lock to it. And Justine Ezerick did a really good video on it as well. So she'll show you. It has a mic on it. I don't think it's particularly useful, but the point is that I think that one of them is great, but I could definitely see someone who's doing product demos, education, that type of thing, having 2 or 3 of these. One is a close-up that you can show things. One is on you. We did notice, and I haven't bought 2 yet, is that there is a little selector here. So I'm guessing that I can control more than one
switch.
Camera. Like I was like, I wonder what that's
for.
Would
you daisy chain them, you think? Or
no, you'd put them in. This would be a great like Mac Mini. It only uses you can use a regular USB-A, so you can have a Mac Mini with a couple of these plugged in. And then if you're using something like OBS or Memo Live is probably what I'd probably use on a Mac. OBS is not super stable, but you can also remember these will show up in Keynote. So you could have a Keynote presentation and be, having, you and possibly a close-up. And even again, you could go to the Keynote presentation, go to the slide, hit the position and go to it. No, we haven't. One thing we're reaching out to them and trying to find the right person to talk to at Insta360. We're hoping that they're going to add an open API so that we can, set up a button and I hit something on a Stream Deck and it, changes this and then changes the slide and then moves over here and those types of things. But it's the first camera that we've really seen that I felt like was a real jump up for a web camera that I've seen since COVID started. We felt like it was going to take a couple of years, and it was about a couple of years before people really start building stuff for us. And I think this is a pretty slick little camera. So if you're looking for the next gen, this is it right now.
Man, now you got me with my finger poised on the butt.
Yeah,
button.
It's nifty.
It's a lot of money. Lisa uses a Brio on your recommendation, but
the Brio is still a great camera. I don't think I would ship this out.
If you don't move around, if you don't need to have all those other needs, a Brio.
Well, and I think it's fine. And this is better. You can make little adjustments without having to go up to the UVC or whatever. It'll get you a better image. We're not ready to send out this to clients because it is a little tweaky. Like it's small and they could break it. Even packing it, they could break it. And so it is something that's more for someone who's really, this is your item. But I think that, and again, I think that what I'm really excited about is getting a couple of these, opening up Memo Live by Boinks and playing with being able to cut between things relatively effectively. So that's the next thing we're going to play with.
Wow. Insta, which does a great 360 camera, now has a desktop zoom camera.
Yeah, so it's a very odd thing for them to jump into, but they really knocked it out of the park. What makes it, again, is you open up the software, and the software is dramatically better. And the error, the previous one, Logitech, had okay software. Never really,
this works on the Mac,
obviously,
and it works fine on the Mac, as well as Windows, I presume. Yes.
Yeah, it does. It does, absolutely. And so, but the software is really, it's the control software that really makes the camera. This camera would be a big, can't even call it a doorstop, a door jam, if they hadn't really worked on the software, and they've done a great job on the software as well.
Nice. Insta360 Link is the name of it, and you can find it if you go to the Insta360.com website.
And it was like cumulatively from the time it was announced, probably 20 or 25 questions in office hours. Like everybody's buying them and talking about them and playing with them.
Yeah, we've been seeing a lot of coverage. Yeah, I didn't realize Justina had done a thing.
She did a video.
Yeah, nice. Good pick. All of yous, you did your job this week in fine form. I'm going to have to get a little extra in the pay packet for you there. Jason, don't spend it all at the bar. Jason Snell is at 6colors.com. That's where he writes, but you'll find him on many, many, many podcasts, which are all promoted on 6colors.com.
All the podcasts.
All the podcasts. Anything you want to particularly highlight?
No, check me out talking to Mike Hurley on Upgrade on Mondays. We talk about that. That's a good one.
It's a good one. There are many podcasts.
Relay.fm/upgrade, but that's just one of many.
Also, the final update on the under-table touch fingerprint button.
Yeah, I mean, I gave everybody here that update last week, but there it is. It's, it's there right now.
It's a pretty thing.
Touch ID. Apple should probably sell something else other than a keyboard with a Touch ID thing on it. That'd be nice.
By the way, the whole keyboard is in this box.
That's what I 3D printed. That's actually one of my 2 3D printed things, is that little
cool.
case.
6colors.com. Thank you, Jason. Always a pleasure. Andy Ihnatko, when is your next appearance on the fine GBH in Boston?
It's going to be Thursday, 10 minutes to 1. Not in the library studio, but in zooming from home. So maybe I can justify getting that really cool camera.
Charge it off to GBH. They'll pay for it.
We'll see how that works. That's a good advice. I'm definitely going to consider that. But go to wgbhnews.org and you can watch the live stream live, or you can stream it later on.
Actually, that makes me think. I wonder for Christmas this year if we should send all our hosts the Insta 360. Alex, do you think that'd be a good use of our funds?
Oh yeah.
We send you guys microphones, so the audio's good. Let's maybe upgrade the cameras.
I got a Fez.
Did you get a Fez one year?
I still have a Fez.
Oh, yeah.
I was so mad at myself. I forgot. I could have brought the Fezes on the cruises and had us all look like doofuses. But
that Fez has survived a lot of moves.
I think, Leo, I think that's what's called gilding the lily.
Gilding the lily. Thank you, sir. Thank you. You're absolutely right. OfficeHours.global is where you'll find Alex Lindsay every morning doing amazing stuff. And the rest of the day is at 090.media. What's going on at Office Hours this week?
I'm really excited about, so we, of course, the weeks are great. We're having we're talking about this tomorrow. We're doing today we're talking about mics. Tomorrow, Nick Jushishin from Drexel University is coming back. He went to SIGGRAPH, so he's going to break down what he saw that was cool. We do this thing where we see something that we really like and we break it down. So on Thursday morning, we're going to look at the ILM Light and Magic, and we're going to just go through the frames and just go, how are they framed? It's not so much about it. It's about that is a really good interview frame, and what did they do here, and what is the detail, and trying to learn from what someone does that they spent obviously millions of dollars on.
This is the Apple TV Plus documentary on ILM.
It's Disney Plus.
I'm sorry, Disney Plus.
Yeah.
Should have been Apple Plus. Disney Plus, of course.
Yeah, exactly. And
really amazing. Lawrence Kasdan directed it, and it's just so good.
Oh, absolutely. And then Friday, one of the other things we do is we do a lot of transparent production. So Friday, we're talking about what we're going to do. IBC is like NAB in Europe. And so there is, I think there's going to be 40 people working on it, on the coverage for IBC, only for a couple hours. But there's 10 people that'll be on the ground. There's 20 or 30 people that are offsite that are doing edits and graphics and cutting the show and so on and so forth. And so we're going to talk about where that is in what we're doing on Friday. And then the other thing I'm really excited about is this thing we're doing with Michael Krasny that was formerly from KQED. Wow, are these conversations good? We had Amber on a couple weeks ago.
Oh,
nice. We had an astronomer on that was just amazing. Every one of these conversations is just
where can we find that? The Krasny podcast?
That's a Gray Matter. It's EY, but you could probably mistype it and it would still work. graymatter.show. Online, and you'll see the list of the people. I mean, we've had the president. I mean, Michael's Rolodex is very deep. So we had the president of Council for Foreign Affairs, which I've been reading foreign affairs for a long time. So Council for Foreign Relations was a big deal. But Amber's interview was incredible. We're just getting a couple. These are just starting to come out, and each one of them is just really been.
Nice.
really, really interesting. And we've got and all you have to do is go up there, sign up for the podcast, and you'll start getting it. We allow people to listen to the live version. Some folks in office hours right now are doing it. Eventually we'll open it up to a wider group, which is that you can listen and ask questions. So like a third of the show are people that are listening to the show asking questions. But Michael is a pretty good interviewer. It's just like if you were in the Bay Area, it's just like the radio show.
A great radio show for decades. Yeah.
He's like, we're like getting all ready. And then he just goes, "Welcome to Gray Matter." And it's just like, it is exactly like form.
Nice.
It's just nice. Very, very smooth and clean. And it's great. So anyway, that's what we're doing.
Thank you, all three of you. We do MacBreak Weekly on a Tuesday. If I get here on time, 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern time, 1800 UTC. I say the live time so you can watch live if you want. You don't have to. Obviously, it's a podcast, but there is a live stream of all of our productions at live.twit.tv. Chat with us live at irc.twit.tv or in the Discord if you're a Club Twit member. After the fact, the show will appear at the website, twit.tv/mbw. Like most of our shows, there's a dedicated YouTube channel as well. And, of course, you could always subscribe in your favorite podcast client. Get the audio or the video the minute it's available. People who watch on demand might want to participate in other fora. We have a Twit community forum running discourse software. It's really excellent and a great place to hang out. That's free. We also have twit.social, which is our Mastodon instance and a place we also can hang out if you're looking for a Twitter replacement that is federated and open source. This is a good one. Twit.social and twit.community. And iCloud is now back, according to Scooter X in the system status page. Yay. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time. Now, you better get back to work, because guess what? Break time. It's over. Bye-bye.
Is that an iPhone in your hand? Wait a second. Is that an Apple Watch on your wrist? And do I see an iPad sitting there on the table? Oh my goodness. You are the perfect person to be watching iOS Today, the show where Rosemary Orchard and I, Micah Sargent, talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS, HomePod OS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer, and we show you how to make the most of those gadgets. Just head to twit.tv/iOS to check it out.